Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 246, Moreno versus Albazi, also known as UFC Edmonton. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. And before anything else, an apology to all of you on both of our behalf, as we would have loved to join you in mourning and lamentation after the end of UFC 308 this past Friday. Real life intruded. We weren't running. I wasn't running away from all my upset picks in the top two fights. I would have come and taken my medicine, but we just weren't able to do it. Hopefully, grieving is a very private process, and hopefully you made peace with, the MMA gods for doing that to us. But we're back. We're previewing UFC Edmonton. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I echo your apologies. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but things happen. Let's recap real quick. Ilia Topuria is really, really good. Khamzat Chimaev is really, really good.
They are really, really good. And yeah, I called the card, I think, perfect versus awesome, because there were, three undefeated fighters on the main card fighting three extremely beloved fighters. Sure. The undefeateds stayed undefeated. And if I didn't say in the preview of the main fight that Topuria would have to do something we've never seen before to roll over Max Holloway, I sure thought it, and doggone it if he didn't do something we've never seen before. Yeah. Think of all the artillery fire that Max Holloway has taken, yeah. Really just all the hardest hitters in the history of that division, and it's Topuria that just unbelievable.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely
we got 14 more fights to talk about. Otherwise, I'd say let's recap that card as bonus content now. But yeah, we can't. Life moves on. The conveyor belt that is the modern UFC keeps rolling, and they're rolling into Edmonton, Alberta, Canada this coming weekend. Rogers Place, a pretty regular stop for for the industry leader. It's a 14 fight card. As a fight night card, I mean, tell me what you think of this one, Keith. I'm gonna say that in terms of overall divisional relevance, it isn't maybe the strongest fight night card of the year, but it's up there. The Moreno Albazi winner and then the Blanchfield Namajunas winner in the co-main event are both at least close to title shots in their divisions. And then down the card from that, it's another ESPN card. They need to get fights for their contracted fighters. They have to sell tickets. And for what it's worth, 14 fight card. There are 8 Canadians on this card. Considering that this is not one of those years where Canadians are just overwhelming the UFC, I think they did a pretty good job with that. Yeah, just a kind of an interesting lineup. Tell me what you think about it.
Yeah, so I kind of rank I kind of put them in different categories, like the events. So to me, the highest tier is not just pay-per-views, but the special ones, like your cornerstone ones, your International Fight Week, your New York City Madison Square Garden card, like this year the Spear, obviously UFC 300 happened this year. So there's a lot of ones. That's the highest tier. That's held to the highest tier is
2 title fights and Bo Nickel is the highest tier.
Yeah, that's right. A high standard. Okay, the next, so I'm grading you against those. Mm-hmm. UFC 300 had a different grade than a fight night. So that's a top tier. The next tier down is your pay-per-views. So last week's one is just, to me, is like a regular pay-per-view, and you grade them against regular pay-per-views. Then you have your events that are in cities, that are fight nights, but they're in cities. Mm-hmm. This one's in Edmonton. When they go to Portland and they go to Boston and different ones. And then the lowest to me is your in Vegas, every single week of the same Apex. That's your lowest one with no crowd. Yeah. So for that tier, that third tier, I think this is a really good card. I'm going to give you an A-. I think it's that good. I mean, I think you got two fights that could headline that you mentioned divisional relevance. There's a lot of balance. I don't know about you, but I had a hard time writing down my predictions of who I'm going to take, because there was one of those I flip-flopped a lot. There
is not a single 3-1 favorite on this entire card.
There you go. So the other thing is the reason why I didn't put it an A or higher is the only thing I think it's missing that up and coming guy that I don't really know too much about, but I'm excited from what I've seen. or someone who could be a future whatever, fill in the blank. They don't have that. They have like the up and coming guys. A guy like Mike Malott has already been challenged and stuff. Like I'm waiting for like that's the only thing that thing's missing. As far as Canada, like there's a lot of Canadians on this card. You mentioned 8 Canadians. Then you even have like people that are that people don't like. They should be Canadian. Like Erin Blanchfield just comes off like she's Canadian.
She has a very Canadian tan. Like
she just comes off. She's soft spoken, and her trash talk seems like she doesn't really trash talk. It's more like just confidence in herself. But then you have people that people don't realize is Canadian. For example, like I've said a million times, my wife's Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people didn't know that Ariane Lipski was Canadian.
Well, I had like to me. I don't know if this is a racist thing, but all Canadian women look the same to me. So Ariane Lipski, Jasmine Jasudavicius, Mrs. Shillan, you put them in a lineup. I'd have to hear them talk.
I'm wearing the American flag, and I'm like, I hope people are like, oh, dude, it's a Canadian card, and I'm promoting America. Listen, my favorite person right there. Wait, where's my finger?
Canadian,
right above my head. You can see it. I can't do it. Right there is Canadian. Born and raised in Canada. That woman right there, looking right at you every time you swear, like she just. And she is when you think of stereotypes Canadians, like that's her. Other than she can ice skate really good, but her dad was a lumberjack for Pete's sake. Like legit, like her dad was a lumberjack for like 30 years. So yeah.
One interesting thing about this card, if this card had a tagline like again UFC cards did for a long time, this would be the card of the excluded middle. And of course, when we like the idea of the excluded middle is like a political thing where the most extreme people on both sides of any issue get the most noise, and it makes the thing seem more divisive and adversarial than it has to be. But
well, good thing we're not in a political time right now.
Good thing we're not in a political time. Hey, if
Keith and I is coming up, right?
Yeah. If Keith and I can talk for 6 hours a week and end it with a smile, all of you can too. But this card has no lightweight fights, 1 welterweight, 1 middleweight, and everything else is the biggest and smallest fighters in the entire UFC. There's 3 heavyweight fights on this card, and then there's like 2 or 3 women's flyweight, 2 or 3 men's flyweight, bantamweight. It's just interesting. Like they just scooped out the whole middle, and it's heavyweights. And I would love them to take the 6 heavyweights on this card, like Derek Lewis, Jonata Deniz, Alexander Romanov, Rodrigo Nascimento, take all those guys, put them on one side of a seesaw and put the rest of the people on the card on the other side, and like just let them kind of go back.
See how much? No, like like have like a contest. You have to you have the 6 heavyweights, and they're like, how many people will it take? Fans have to pick. Like I say 10. I say, and then slowly from the lightest person down, moving up.
Like, or have them do like a tug of war, kind of like when I was like a camp counselor when I was like 20 in the summers. Like the 5 like jock dudes would get in a tug of war with like 80 like 3rd graders, and we'd lose terribly. They just drag us all down the field because anyway. I don't know why I'm spewing this much bullshit when we have 14 fights to talk about. Do you want to jump into these?
Yeah, let's do it.
First up at UFC Edmonton is a women's flyweight matchup between Jamey-Lyn Horth and Ivana Petrovic. Horth, the 34-year-old Canadian, is 6-1 overall. She's 1-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing LFA women's flyweight champ. Made her UFC debut last April, taking a unanimous decision over Haley Cowan. Then came back last December at UFC on ESPN, Dariush versus Sarukian, and dropped a split decision to Veronica Hardy. She's been on the shelf for almost a full year, but she is back, looking to get back into the win column against Petrovic, who is in a similar position, having put her own first career loss in the rearview fairly recently. Petrovic, 30-year-old fighting out of Norway, is 7-1 overall. She is also 1-1 in the UFC. In her case, she joined the UFC as the outgoing Aries FC women's flyweight champ. She dropped her UFC debut last July to Luana Carolina, came back this April at UFC on ESPN, Nicolau versus Perez, and tapped out Liang Na in the 3rd round. Odds on this one do favor the Canadian. Horth is -200, Petrovic +170. Keith, you mentioned that there's a kind of shortage of real lights out prospects on this card. Like there isn't a Bo Nickel, a Tatsuro Taira type on this card. But these are two women in a fairly wide open division right now that have one loss.
No.
All right. I won't even ask if Keith sees.
I answered your question. I knew what you're going to ask.
Okay. With no title upside in this, who at least gets their second UFC win? How do you see this one playing out?
I want to look into any like women that have what is that, like the little dash in it, like the two names, like
the hyphen.
Yeah, hyphen. Like, why none of them are any good? Who's the best hyphened woman? I mean, I'm sure there's probably someone super obvious.
I'll think about it.
And I'm not talking about someone who like has like, you go Caitlin Chikagian / whatever her new name is.
Well, no, because like, Jamey-Lyn Horth, her first name is hyphenated. It's not a.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. What am I talking about? Yeah, it's even worse. Yeah. Like the first name hyphenated. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's Ian Machado Gary.
Yeah. Nice job, man. Nice job.
Thank you.
Jamey-Lyn, I'll start with the Canadian. Is she from Edmonton?
She fights out of British Columbia, which is all the way over on the West Coast. So I don't think so. I don't think she's from Edmonton.
And okay, all right. I have no idea where Edmonton is. I know that's where Bret Hart's from, right?
Yes.
Okay. I hope they get the Hitman in attendance. That'd be pretty cool. You know, I always find funny when the UFC goes to any country, they have to like put any person. Canada's like size wise is bigger than America.
Yep.
And like they'll be like, oh, the hometown fighter, and it's like they don't imagine if they had someone from like Boston and put him in you know LA and be like the hometown fighter.
Yep.
we don't do that at all. But so Jamey-Lyn Horth, you know, she's a long and lengthy fighter, better athlete than she looks. She moves pretty well. She doesn't like being pressured though. She wants to work from distance. She does a lot of L stepping, so you can tell she has like a very boxing background because that's something you see in boxing a lot. Nice output. Though she was a little gun shy against Veronica Hardy, which is why she probably lost a close fight. She throws straight shots down the pipe, which I like. Good teep kicks. She will throw some naked leg kicks, which I don't like though. She keeps her chin too high for my liking. She's been hurt a lot in fights. She closes distance and she's mean though. She can grind in the clinch. Not a great offensive wrestler, not a great defensive wrestler, though she is hard to hold down. If she gets to fight the ground, she's got 2 submission wins, and she's got pretty good cardio. She'll press the action in the fight. Petrovic, she's also a long and lengthy fighter. She's a southpaw, a bit of a point fighter, throws a lot of arm punches, though I do like her straight left. It's pretty good. She will look to wrestle a lot more than Horth will. She likes to get inside, get some body locks. If she gets to the fight ground, she does need to improve her overall control. Not the best defensive wrestler, though. I can see Horth trying to drag her down to the ground, but it's not really something that Horth is great at. But if she gets on the bottom, she struggles there. Though she does have 3 submissions on her record. I'm not really high on either of these. I would say Horth faced the better competition and won. And I guess, you know, that added in the home country that she's the favorite. That really, like, you know, the first fight, I think, you know, the crowd will be behind her. She's got more experience. But I think I'm going to go with the upset. I think Petrovic has the advantage in the wrestling department. I think she might get a takedown or 2. I think she'll have success there. I don't think she'll be able to keep Horth down. Horth's a very strong woman. I flip-flopped a little bit, but I think the takedown's just that slight tiebreaker for me. I feel when I first wrote these notes, I forgot that they were in Canada. It was, you know, previewing 8 Canadians never crossed my mind. But give me Petrovic by split decision.
I can feel the upset potential there because while I am leaning Horth here, I'm not leaning Horth to the tune of 2-1 odds. I like that you pointed out that she's more athletic than you would think when she gets in the cage. She's also, having watched her fight in LFA and even TKO. She's just bigger and stronger than I thought, than I expected. I'm with you. I don't think either of these women is probably a future title challenger, especially Horth, who's already 34 and just 7 fights into her career. But I think she's going to have some staying power. Give me Horth to basically kind of give us a very women's flyweight fight where she sprawls and brawls her way to victory, gets slightly the better of the exchanges on the feet, and fights off enough takedown attempts from Petrovic, or Petrovic just mystifyingly doesn't try to bring the fight to the ground as often as she should. But give me Horth to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a fight mostly contested on the feet. Next up on the UFC Edmonton prelims is a men's bantamweight matchup between Chad Anheliger and Cody Gibson. Anheliger, the 37-year-old Canadian, is 13-7 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's coming in off a win. He faced Pampas Gregorio back in March at UFC Fight Night, Tuivasa versus Tybura, outlasting the Long Island native to a pretty one-sided unanimous decision win. That allowed him to snap a 2-fight losing streak, and he will look to start a win streak here by getting past Gibson. Gibson, also 37 years old, fighting out of California, though very famously has relocated everything to Las Vegas to give this UFC thing one more try. He is 20-10 overall. He is 2-5 across 2 separate stints with the UFC. One of them literally a full decade ago. He rejoined the UFC last year through season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter, and since then he is 1-2. He lost his first 2 fights back before running into Brian Kelleher this July at UFC on ESPN, Lemos versus Jandiroba, where he tapped out Kelleher in the first round with an arm triangle choke. So he also looking to build a new win streak here, inch his way towards 500 in the UFC. He is moderately favored to do so. Gibson is minus 190 and Anheliger plus 160. Keith, give me your take on this fight. Let me know. I'm not even going to ask in men's bantamweight. I'm not going to ask you if either of these 37-year-old guys is, but it's worth noting. I mentioned up front that this card is really heavy on the lighter weight classes. It's also heavy on the lighter weight classes with guys that are 34 or over, which is not something you see as often. We think of 135 and even, we think of 135 and even 145 for men, and certainly 125 as the speed kills divisions where your days are numbered after you hit your 33rd birthday. But this card has 5 or 6 people on the second half of their 30s that are in those divisions. So whether that's just a reflection of the UFC's new anti-doping partner or just the overall evolution of the sport, I don't know. But here's 2 37-year-olds that are in the UFC fighting at 135. Who gets it done?
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. I'll start with Gibson. He's, almost was the Ultimate Fighter winner. At his age, you're not expecting this great athlete, and he isn't that at all. But I will say this, man, the dude's tough. He just, all you got to do is look at the fight against Brackatona, which is a fight that heading in, not many people expect to be a barn burner, especially because of Brackatona's style. And that fight, it was such a battle. I was there live. I loved it. Gibson he breaks guys with pressure, and he just kept coming after Katona. It took a broken orbital bone for the guy finally to stop him. He's got great volume. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He has more power than you think he does. He doesn't have the best technique sometimes. He can kind of overthrow his shots. Despite having, range on a lot of his opponents, he'll get in the pocket and he'll brawl it out. Like I said, against Katona, he did that despite, being a bigger guy. He keeps he dips a lot. He over dips to avoid strikes, which is he's going to get high kick to something in that. He also doesn't react well to strikes. I don't think he gets hurt. He just doesn't help himself in the optics. Like he doesn't have control of his body really well. I do like his kicks though. Hard kicks to the body. Very underrated wrestler. He wrestles a lot. He's got good cardio. He's going to go hard the entire fight. Anheliger, it's hard to get excited also about a 37-year-old, and I've already seen dipping athleticism, but he's better than I than I thought. Like he was a guy that I was like, wow, you know what? Like watching film studies, like he's not too bad. Guy who got in the UFC a little later. He isn't consistent though. I mean, he against Alatang Haley, he just circled the perimeter of the fight most of the fight. But in other fights, he's moving forward. He's pressing the action. He's setting up shots with feints. Though, like I said, like against Haley, he wasn't throwing enough. When he lets his hands go, he's got a nice solid jab. He wings his overhand right. I love that he gets inside and starts looking for elbows. He throw a lot of uppercuts and knees up the middle, which you don't see a lot. He has some power. I mean, he really steps into his shots. He's got hard calf kicks. I mean, his last fight against Gregorio, he destroyed him with calf kicks. He will wrestle a lot. If he gets the fight to the ground, good ground upon on top. Though he was swept in his last fight, and he's a bad defensive wrestler. He makes matters worse by jumping guillotine. He does have a guillotine to his credit, and he will go down on the ground. He does pretty well to get back up. From the top, he's got pretty good ground and pound, and he also has good cardio to go hard all 15 minutes. I think it's a fun fight. Like this is not a fight that people are gonna be like, if you're getting there to the arena, you're getting there like oh man, I definitely want to check out Cody Gibson, Chad Anheliger, but I think you should. Like I expect a lot of action in this fight. I think I kind of like both guys a lot. As much as you can like mid card, or in this case early card, late 30-year-olds. I've kind of flip-flopped a lot on this one too. Like I said in the intro to this card, that I think the fights are really close and hard to pick. I like Gibson's output, and I don't like Anheliger's defensive wrestling. I think both guys will have their moments, but that'll be the difference. I'll go split decision to start the card 2 in a row. So give me Gibson by split decision.
Yeah, I like the pick there, and I like what you pointed out about both guys. Anheliger has had some really depressing, discouraging performances in just 4 fights in the UFC, and some very encouraging ones. Like the Jose Johnson fight was a bad look, because it's not like he was working Johnson and just got tired or got caught. Like Jose Johnson, who is built like a praying mantis, he's got to be the tallest guy in that division. He's like a 6-foot tall bantamweight. Kind of soundly out wrestled and out grappled Chad Anheliger for most of the fight, before finally tapping him out in the 3rd round. That's not a good look. Especially, it's not a good look against someone like Gibson, who is also a very big bantamweight, who's pretty savvy on the ground. But then you pointed out the Gregorio fight. He worked on the legs which is brilliant, because Gregorio is a boxing type who's on his front foot and much faster and more explosive than Anheliger, but Anheliger took that away, and he took it away quickly by kicking his lead leg. And then once Gregorio started to get tired, and just the route was on. Great performance by him in that fight, but I don't think he's going to be able to duplicate that against Gibson. I'm with you that this should be a really fun fight, even if it's low in terms of divisional relevance. But you know what? In the second fight on the 14-fight card, that's about the best you can hope for. Give me Gibson by decision here as well. But yeah, it should be a whole lot of fun. We stay in the men's bantamweight division as Sidey meets Garrett Armfield. Sidey, the 28-year-old Canadian, is 10-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series last September with a extremely fun half-round brawl that was stopped early against Ramon Taveras. It was fun enough that the UFC signed both of them and had them run it back this January at UFC 297. The follow-up fight was equally fun, went the distance, and Sidey ended up on the wrong end of a split decision. So having completed basically the Griffin versus Bonner of Dana White's Contender Series, he now gets to move on to the rest of the roster, and it starts with Armfield on Saturday. Armfield, also 28 years old, from Missouri. He's 10-4 overall. He's 2-2 in the UFC. He is coming in off a loss. He fought in June at UFC on ESPN, Perez versus Tyra, where he got tapped out in the 3rd round by Brady Heastand. Prior to that, he had been on a 2-fight win streak over Toshiomi Kazama and Brad Katona, and had frankly been looking pretty good. He will look to get back in the win column here. He is not favored to do so, as Sidey is a -160 favorite, Armfield +130 coming back. This is another fight, kind of like Anheliger versus Gibson, that I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Obviously, Serhiy Sidey is in the UFC right now because he had a fantastically enjoyable 2.5 minute scrap on the Contender Series that bought him some goodwill. And then Armfield is just straight out of the Midwest prospect playbook. Like, I won't say Midwest journeyman because he's 28 years old. He's in the UFC and he's beating some good people, but Midwest prospect where he's not the biggest bantamweight. He's not the most athletic, but he's well-rounded, tends to fight with pretty good fight IQ. And if he is the better wrestler in the cage, he's usually going to do pretty well, regardless of whether he has to use his wrestling to do it or not. Like, when he is the guy that gets to decide where the fight takes place, he does well. And that's actually kind of how I'm feeling him here as an underdog pick. I like CD, but so far what I've really seen out of him is thrashing some overmatched dudes on the regional scene, and then his 2 fights with Ramon Taveras, which, again, kind of like Griffin and Bonner, were high on volume, high on back and forth heroics, low on refined technique. Like, CD is tall, long, and lengthy, doesn't really use his length to his best advantage. He's too happy to engage in the phone booth with people that he has reach on. And I think that's going to work in Armfield's favor here, as Armfield is shorter. I haven't seen the tail of the tape, but I have the feeling he's going to give up more reach than he does height. But Armfield, I mean, he's going to come forward. He's already proven pretty good at getting into his preferred boxing range against fighters of different body types, different levels of athleticism. And I think Armfield can take this fight to the ground if he wants, or if he prefers, I think he can force it to stay standing. Having that in his back pocket, and then, yeah, I'm leaning Armfield here. Give me Armfield to win a decision in a really fun fight. And I'm guessing there'll be at least one point during the fight where CD starts to kind of tag him up at range, and Armfield gets a clutch takedown, does some damage, kind of stops CD's momentum. And if that wins him the round, it probably wins him the fight.
Yeah. Dude, this is another good fight. I think I'm a little higher in CD than you are. But I'm with you on how I view Armfield. Like, I think Armfield is a little underrated. He's not a great athlete, but I mean, the dude's tough, and he kind of fits our overachiever category. I mean, look at his fight against Brad Katona. I mean, he looked great against Brad Katona. He got nice volume, fast hands, pretty accurate. He throws straight shots down the pipe, sets up his shots well with feints. He's attacking with combinations. He slides into the pocket where he steps into his shots and lets his hands go. He's got underrated power. I mean, he's got 6 TKOs. You take like a guy against like Brady Heastan, who's a good fighter. He lost that fight, but it's not a fight that I think will age poorly. And he dropped Heastan in that fight. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, and he's a weaker defensive wrestler. I mean, he was subbed by David Onama. So like, he's got some losses, but he's one of these guys. Like, I think he's better than his record shows. CD, I think I'm higher in CD than you are. I think he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. I want to go back to the last fight. Like, the first fight against Tavares was a really bad stoppage, very early stoppage. But then he loses a split decision. I got MMADecision.com. It's 21-0 for CD. All 21 people who scored, including me and you, both scored it for CD. So, yeah, he probably should be, 1-0 in the UFC. I think he's a good kickboxer. He's a pressure striker. He throws a hard jab. He follows with clean strikes down the pipe. He has a high guard defense, which he's a taller guy. He keeps his chin a little too high for my liking. I like that he gets in the pocket and he'll throw some like step-in elbows, which you don't see a lot. He works the body well. He has some really good power. He's got a big kicking game. They'll throw some naked leg kicks. He's a good wrestler. Like you mentioned, you're talking about like him just brawling out, but he can sneak in some takedowns. When he's on top, he's got some mean ground and pound. I think this is a really fun fight. I like both guys. I think like Armfield is like grossly underrated. I love that you're taking him. I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm like I started, the Canadians 0-2. I'm gonna say they finally get their first win. I'm leaning CD. I just think he's the better athlete. I think he's slightly better on the feet. I really feel confident he's better on the ground. Give me CD by decision.
We head next to the men's featherweight division for a matchup between Jack Shore and Youssef Zalal. Keith, if Jack Shore and Youssef Zalal had fought each other, say 2 or 3 years ago, even though Shore was a bantamweight at the time, just say they booked him on short notice, Shore moves up to 145 to face Zalal, Shore would have been a colossal favorite against this man.
Negative 400.
Yeah. So buckle up. Shore, 29-year-old Welshman, is 17-2 overall. He is 5-2 in the UFC. He's 1-1 since moving up to featherweight. He came to the UFC as an undefeated prospect and an outgoing Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. Won his first 5 fights in the UFC before running into Ricky Simon in summer of 2022. After his loss to Simon, he moved up to 145 pounds. Since then, he has a win over Makwan Amirkhani and a gruesome doctor stoppage loss to Joanderson Brito at UFC 301 back in May, where his calf and shin looked like a hot dog left too long in the microwave, like it was just going to burst and split. It was, if you remember that fight, you folks at home watching, you're like, you had some PTSD right now because one of the nastier injuries in the UFC in a couple of years. At any rate, he's been on the shelf for 5 months, convalescing from that. He is ready to get back in the cage, and he's going to have to face Zalal. Also 28 years old, Moroccan-American fighting out of Colorado, is 15-5-1 overall. He's 5-3-1 across 2 separate stints in the UFC, but he was let go on a pretty bad skid. I mean, he had 3 losses and a draw, was let go, went and won a couple of fights outside the UFC, was signed early this year, and has been perfect ever since, with rear naked choke submissions of Billy Quarantillo in March and Yarno Aarons in August. He will look to go 3-0 in his return and confirm what we'd been hearing, that he is a changed man, and he is comfortably favored to do so. On a night full of fairly tight money lines, Zalal is one of the biggest favorites on the card at -240, Shore +200 as your underdog.
People jumped off of Jack Shore, huh? Holy moly.
People jumped the heck off of Jack Shore, and it's interesting. While I just kind of had tape rolling and was doing my notes, I was like, why is that? Because it's not like some fighters we'll talk about here where, oh, they're getting old, or the chin is cracked, or they're never the same after the knee surgery. Jack Shore's the same dude. Just I wonder if we saw him hit the ceiling of where overachievement could take him. Because the thing about Shore, even when he was still undefeated and looking great, he debuted in the UFC back in 2019, overwhelmed his first couple of opponents. But even at the time, we were like, yeah, but he's not Ilia Topuria or Sean O'Malley from a standpoint of natural gifts. Like, he is a modest athlete who squeezes every bit of production out of his body and skill set by being extremely well conditioned, extremely well coached, and just having high fight IQ, great toughness. Really a super overachiever, which is something you don't often say about undefeated 25-year-olds, which is what he was at the time. And maybe we've seen him reach the top of where that can take you, because against Ricky Simon, he ran into somebody that was definitely a better athlete and better wrestler than him, and he got Ricky Simon. Simon did his Tasmanian devil impression on him, out wrestled him pretty hard, had some success in the boxing, and ended up tapping him out in the ground in the second round. Then the Brito fight, obviously that particular injury won't happen every time. I mean, that's one kick that he took or checked the wrong way, and then every kick after that just made it worse and worse. But nonetheless, against Brito, we saw him taking on someone who was definitely faster and a harder hitter than him, and he was just having a tough time dealing with it, even without the growing shin injury. that's what makes this fight against Zalal interesting to me, because Zalal is a gifted athlete. Like, he's a good sized guy for the division. He's very nimble, coordinated, fluid, but unlike what you would expect from a Moroccan with kind of his haircut and his cocky attitude, he's not a kickboxer. He uses it best to be kind of a grinder, grappler, underratedly good wrestler. I feel like we're gonna see Shore fight a slightly younger and more athletic version of himself. But if he is still the Jack Shore that wins every fight he's supposed to, and a lot of the ones that he's not supposed to, I don't think he should be a 2-1 underdog here. I like that's wild to me. Jack Shore is still a very good, crisp boxer with decent pop, like not knock you out pop, but people don't ignore his combinations for 3 rounds. Like, it, you know, if you're boxing with Jack Shore, you do something different if he starts landing on you. Like, he has that much power, still doesn't react great to kicks. But again, Zalal isn't that kind of Moroccan that's going to saw his front leg off for him. I've got a couple of upset picks kind of plotted out on this card, but this is the first of the big ones. Give me Jack Shore to get back on track. I don't know if he is a future title contender at 145 or 135, but I do like his move up to 145 because it only accentuates the things that he was already good at. And I don't think it's going to hurt him too much. And I think he gets into the win column here, even though I like Zalal a lot. And it's been a great story to see him back and see him performing so well and so confidently in a fight where I like both guys, but one's got to lose. Give me Jack Shore to pull the fairly substantial upset here and win by decision. And I think this looks like a classic Jack Shore performance where if Zalal is having any kind of success, Shore just does the perfect thing to shut it off. If Zalal starts marking him up on the feet, I think Shore takes him down, and vice versa. So give me Jack Shore to get just a really smart, tough, blue-collar type win here.
Dude, I was looking at the Sherdog rankings that I vote on, but of course I had to double check them to see who's ranked where. Shout out to, I forget who it was, but shout out to that guy who made that joke that I don't know the rankings despite voting on him. You said he's what? What is Jack Shore? Negative?
He's plus 200. Zalal's minus 240.
Okay, minus 240. I was looking at Pitbull, ranked number 8. And I'm like, I don't think I'd feel comfortable picking Pitbull at negative 240 against Jack Shore.
No.
I'm like, Josh Emmett, Calvin Cater, Bryce Mitchell, these guys that are ranked currently in our rankings are top 15 in the world.
Oh, 3 years ago, Jack Shore might not have been plus 200 against Merab.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's absolute absurd that he's this big. And I'm a Zalal guy. Like, I'm a believer now. Like, I'm not dogging Zalal. Like, he's good, and he's really, like, he's convinced me, you know. But I mean, Jack Shore, like, I get, like, there's things that Jack Shore does that, you know, he's not a great athlete, but the dude is super intelligent. He knows what he's good at, and he just goes to it. Despite moving up in weight, he's still, you know, bigger guy in the weight class. On the feet, he's a pressure striker. He doesn't like being pressured back, though. Like, you go back to the Joe Anderson burrito, he couldn't handle the pressure from Joe Anderson burrito. I said he was intelligent guy. His strategy against Joe Anderson burrito was to back up, and try to hug him and tire him out. And he was really trying to play the long game against Brito. And he was so overmatched athletically. It might have been the best strategy. It just never worked because Brito has a much deeper gas tank than he gets credit for based on the way he fights.
And the injury to Shore's shin put him on a timer anyway.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't win by attrition when your leg is. Yeah.
It's like he's trying to, like, smoke a brisket and you know, he didn't have any coals or something. It's like, yeah, it is what it is.
Or you're trying to smoke a brisket and your house is on fire. You don't have enough time to smoke that brisket. Like,
there's a hillbilly somewhere saying, "Yeah, you do."
Depends on what your house is made of.
Yeah. So when he lets his hands go, he works behind a good jab. He attacks with good variety. He's good at keeping you guessing and what's coming at you. He cuts angles well. He showed he has some power against Timur Valiev, but that's it's different weight class and small guy. He targets the body well. He's got a really good kicking game. Hard kicks to the body, strong calf kicks. His high kicking, was great against Marco Americani. He is open to calf kick himself. I mean, we talked about how Brito just butchered his leg. Sure, I mean, the dude's from Wales, but dude's a great wrestler. Nice penetration step. He chains attacks together well. He's relentless to get the takedown. He will, if he can't get it from distance, he'll use his size well and get body lock, takedowns for the clinch. He's good at winning scrambles. He has this little like Dagestani thing going where he'll grab a single limb and just hold down on it until he can advance to a better position. Good back takes. He's got 8 subs on his record. If you put him on his back, though, that's probably his worst position. He almost has like too much confidence in it. He plays BJJ too much. Zalal, the dude looked fantastic recently. Very athletic. He's a long and lengthy guy, elusive, solid boxing. Works really well from distance, quick hands. I love his stepping knee. I mean, love it. That's what makes people. As soon as you start laying a stepping knees, people. I know I sound like broken record. He sold me. It is my favorite technique in MMA. He attacks the legs. Well, a lot of leg kicks. He's got a fast high kick. You mentioned he's a solid wrestler. I like that he said getting into the pocket and hitting these like judo foot sweeps. Not a good defensive wrestler, but he's a great grappler. He's a submission threat, super slick back takes. Took Billy Quarantillo's back several times, and that's kind of what Billy Quarantillo is known for. He can get submissions off his back. I mean, he sub Billy Quarantillo, which is a really good feat. He's incredibly hard to submit himself. I mean, Topuria had him in some deep, this is going back a while, but had him some deep submission attempts a bunch of times, and he fought his way out. And he's got good cardio. I mean, he came in, say what you want, go back to the Topuria fight. He had moments in that fight, especially late against Topuria. And then,
can I throw something out there?
Yeah.
Zalal's fight with Topuria, it was Topuria's UFC debut. Zalal took a round off him, and I'm pretty sure Zalal was the last person to take a round off him until Holloway this past weekend.
Yeah. And I'm gonna guess that loss to Topuria has aged pretty well.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty safe to say. But even like a guy like Damon Blackshay, he came on strong, and that's another like really really tough dude. I think this is an incredible matchup. I'm very high on both guys. I have not jumped off the Shore bandwagon. I mean, I'm with you, man. I don't think Shore should be this big of an underdog, especially if he can get his wrestling going. I mean, I'm still believing in this like rebuild of Zalal's career. I say he has a speed advantage on the feet. I think he uses his grappling enough to stop Shore's entries or even at least threaten with subs to create a scramble going and get up. He's going to have to, because Shore gets you down. He can really grind you. I think Shore's going to have his moments, but I'm going to go the other way. And I feel almost guilty now because like how disrespected Shore is to take Zalal. But I'm going to give me Zalal by decision.
Heavyweights take the cage next at UFC Fight Night 246 as Alexander Romanov faces Rodrigo Nascimento. Romanov, the 33-year-old Moldovan, is 17-3 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC. He's coming in off a loss and having lost 3 of his last 4 after making a pretty significant splash upon his arrival in the UFC 5 years ago. But he fought most recently back in June at UFC 302, where he got tapped out in under half a round by Jailton Almeida. He will look to get back in the win column here against Nascimento. Nascimento, 31-year-old Brazilian, is 11-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is also coming in off a loss. He faced Derek Lewis, whom we'll be talking about in a little while, in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 56 back in May, and got knocked out early in the 3rd round. That snapped a 3-fight win streak for him. He will try to start a new one here at Romanov's expense, and he is ever so slightly favored to do so. Nascimento is minus 125, Romanov plus 105. Here's the thing. you and I, in commenting on the money lines, if we have a strong take on them, it's usually that a line should be closer. Here, I think this line could be wider. I I feel as though I've kind of seen the movie and read the book on Alexander Romanov at this point, and there's always a possibility that he'll change, turn things around. He's 33 in a division where he could continue improving for another 5 years and fight at a reasonably high level for almost another 10, and nobody would blink an eye. But even when he arrived in the UFC as an undefeated European prospect and won his first 5 or 6 fights in the UFC in a row, I was thinking this is not a style that is built for long-term success in the UFC. He is an absolute hulk of a man. I mean, he's not the tallest guy. He's listed at 6'2". That might be right, but he's just got this squat, barrel-chested build, and he is a Greco-Roman style wrestler who, even at his best, has always just expended way too much way too much gas wrestling. He might spend money wrestling. I don't know.
I spend too much money on wrestling.
Yeah, that's
Those damn fees.
Yeah, dude.
USA cards, all that travel.
Dude, even the shoes are expensive. It's like there's nothing to the shoe. It barely has a sole. How is the shoe $150? Anyway, Romanov, if you've seen him fight, if you've seen his highlight reel involves a lot of picking up other 260-pound men with rear waist locks and launching them. And when they try to get up, him launching them again like he's Alexander Karelin or something, which is fantastic. And if you're fighting the Chase Shermans and Marcos Rogerio de Limas of the world and they just don't know what to do about it, you can make some hay that way. You're going to look great. You throw him a couple times, punch him in the side of the head a couple times, wrap up a key lock or an Americana, and get your hand raised. But at the UFC level, when you've got people with actual takedown defense, or at least people with survivability and cardio, we pretty quickly figured out that Romanov has about 6 minutes of functional cardio, even on the way up. I mean, part of his 5-fight win streak when he joined the UFC was him getting a technical decision over Juan Espino, and he took an inadvertent foul in the 3rd round of that fight when he was gassing bad. Espino was picking up momentum, and it's never a good look when he was probably like 11-0 or something at the time, when you are heard to ask the ref, if I can't continue, is it a disqualification or a no contest or what? That's not a good sign. So that is the concern of a front runner, and Romanov is kind of a front runner. And on top of everything else, he seemed to be trending the right way to figure out a way to make his game work in the UFC. I think I've said this before, but when he got to the UFC, his first 4 fights in the UFC, he weighed between 260 and 265 pounds. Then he started dropping weight and started looking good. He went from 260, 264 to 237 against Jared Vandera. 237 against Chase Sherman, 239 against Marcin Tybura, even if he lost that fight. But after the losing to Tybura, his first career loss, he checked in for his very next fight right at the heavyweight limit, and he's been back at the heavyweight limit ever since. And how people looked at the weigh-ins is not a valid predictor of how they're going to perform in the cage in most cases. But when you have a heavyweight with a gas tank problem, and all of a sudden he's just basically put back on at least 30 pounds of useless weight, that's not a good sign. And since then, yeah, he's lost 3 of his last 4. And Tybura outlasted him just by being a good wrestler, a big guy, and a veteran who hung on and pulled ahead. Alexander Volkov destroyed him. Just a couple of kicks up the middle, and Romanov wasn't even like trying to take him down anymore. And his loss to Jailton Almeida was the most obvious thing, like one of the more obvious results in recent UFC history. He has 1 win over Blagoy Ivanov, or like the ghost of Blagoy Ivanov. I have no faith in Alexander Romanov to beat any kind of decent UFC heavyweight. And while I don't know if Rodrigo Nascimento is a future contender, I do know this: he is absolutely titanic, and he's very good on the ground. it feels weird to say Rodrigo Nascimento by whatever he wants, like he's, prime Cain Velasquez or something, but I don't think Romanov can necessarily take Nascimento down if Nascimento doesn't want to go down. And even if he takes him down, I don't think he can do the sort of rinse and repeat mat returns that he was doing on people like Jared Vanderaa. I think Nascimento could keep this thing on the feet and box Romanov up if he wanted. I think if Romanov takes Nascimento down, he may not like what he gets down there. I think Nascimento is big enough and strong enough that he could just sort of sweep him, take top position. Romanov, very much like most MMA heavyweights, is solid when he's on top, not great when he's on bottom. Yeah, I think this fight could be a lot wider than minus 125 for Nascimento, because the ways that Alexander Romanov wins fights, just I can't envision those happening here. Give me Rodrigo Nascimento by second round TKO on the ground. And if the best I could hope for out of this fight is that it's real fun for 3 or 4 minutes before Romanov gets tired. But yeah, this is about as comfortable as I felt about a pick on this close of a money line in quite a while. I think Nascimento wrecks Romanov.
Wow, man, you jumped off the Alexander Romanov bandwagon. So I gotta say this. You mentioned Romanov being a Greco-Roman wrestler. So there's 3 kinds of wrestling: folk style. Well, not count like sumo and shit, but like generally speaking, folk style, freestyle, and Greco. Greco's the worst of the 3. It's the most boring. It sucks. You gotta pretend like the legs don't exist and shit. Just weird. Anyway, I know they used to do it in the friggin' Coliseums naked and shit, but all right, they used to feed Christians to the lions too. So
yeah.
I disagree with your assessment. One thing you said about Romanov that is like ridiculously bad. You said that he's a front runner. He might be a front walker.
He's no kind of runner.
He ain't running. I'll tell you that. I mean, honestly, the last 6 months, I've probably been in the gym more times than he has. Like, dude, like you said that, you've read the book or seen the movie. I've seen the movie too. It's called The Nutty Professor. 1 minute he's in good shape. Next minute he's a fat slob. Then he's in good shape. Then he's a fat slob. I mean, Romanov, his skills, like, he's a southpaw. His striking is actually somewhat better than he gets credit. Everyone thinks he's a one-dimensional fighter, and again, like his wrestling is definitely his go-to. But because of that, he will land more strikes than he gets credit with. But ultimately, all of his striking is to close the distance. He likes to get chest to chest, slapping titties. He wants to grind in the clinch. You talked about based on that Greco-Roman style, he likes upper body takedowns, lateral drops, bear hugs, that kind of things. He will shoot from the outside. And he's very physically strong. Suplex guys, like he suplexed Chase Sherman, but ultimately he wants to grind and get close. If he gets on top, I think I'm a little higher on his top game than you are. He works through advanced position around. He's got some good ground and pound. He is a legit submission threat. He's got 9 subs on his record, but the issue you mentioned is motivation. It comes into what kind of shape he's in. I mean, one fight he looks freaking jacked, and like the next fight he looks like freaking jelly roll. His style of wrestling, is grinding and clinching, and that style is meant for people in shape. It's meant to tire your opponent. Instead, it just tires himself. He gassed out bad against Marcin Tybura. I mean, his cardio was a little bit better against Blogger Ivanov, but yeah, Jourdain Almeida finished him quickly, but just look at him. Look at him.
Ivanov isn't putting the pace on people.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, I think Blake Ivanov has always been old. I think he was. Yeah. I think he was born like 38 years old, but even against like Jourdain Almeida, like I made something quick, but like just look at him. He wasn't gonna let go 15 minutes. Nascimento, Dude, how about this guy? He goes from headlining a card to his next fight being on the prelims of a fight night. He's a pretty athletic heavyweight, southpaw that marches down his foe. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He gets in the pocket and he throws hard. His right hook is a good shot. He's got a massive kicking game, quick high kick. He has a lot of defensive issues. He keeps his chin high in the air. He wasn't reacting to punches very well from Derek Lewis. But I mean, we're talking about the biggest hitter in the history of the UFC. But he likes to grapple. He loves to get the clinch, and he looks for some inside trips. He'll also shoot from the outside. He is a submission artist. He has 6 subs on his record, though I do think his ground game is like grossly overrated. I mean, the UFC broadcast team is going to try to pretend he's like the new Fabricio Verdum on the ground. That's just not the case. But I actually like his ground and pound. An in-shape Romanov, I actually think is a tough stylistic matchup for Nascimento. And I totally agree with you. Like, I don't ever take stock in how they look at weigh-ins. I've seen guys look like I remember thinking about, like, Conor McGregor was best at 145, and when he weighed in, he looked like freaking Skeletor at times.
Mm-hmm.
But he was great at 145. I just think this dude doesn't care. I mean, I say I'm with you, man. I'm not as high as I don't know if you're high on Nascimento or if you're just really down on Romanov. I'm not that high on Nascimento, but I say he just beats him up from the outside. I say Romanov tries to clinch and he just wears himself out. I think it was completely shot by the second. I say Nascimento hurts him on the feet and then subs him. I think it's gonna be like a club and sub style. Give me Nascimento by second round submission.
After that brief heavyweight interlude, we head right back down to the men's bantamweight division as Charles Jourdain faces off against Victor Henry. Jourdain, the 28-year-old Canadian, is 15-8-1 overall. He is 6-7-1 since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in Canada's TKO promotion. He held both their featherweight and their lightweight titles. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, comprising both of his cage appearances so far this year. He dropped a split decision to Sean Woodson at UFC 297 in January, then came back in June at UFC 303 and got knocked out in the second round by Jean Silva. He will look to snap that losing streak against Henry. Henry, 37-year-old Californian, is 24-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 3-1 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former standout in a lot of Japanese promotions, including Pancrase and Rizin. He is coming in off a win. He head kicked poor Hani Yahya at UFC on ESPN Nicolau versus Perez back in April. Prior to that, he fought almost exactly a year ago. It ended in a no contest when Javid Basharat kicked him in the groin. Maybe the worst groin kick I've ever seen outside of heavyweight. It was really bad. And it was made worse by the ref and doctor refusing to believe that he'd been hit in the nuts. Anyway, that's over a year ago. I'm sure Henry's trying to forget it. This fight, on a fight full of close money lines, it is the only true pick 'em on the card. Both men are out there at -110. Keith, both of these guys are a little surprising to me. Like, every time Jourdain fights, I'm surprised that he's hovering right around 500 in the UFC, just because his highlights are impressive enough that I just feel like he should be winning more than he is. And then Henry's really been a pleasant surprise. When you're a bantamweight and you show up in the UFC and you're already 34 years old, my expectations are minimal. I thought at best we'd get a guy that was going to be a whole lot of fun. I mean, he's a Josh Barnett disciple, which means both his striking and his grappling are kind of a different flavor than what you're used to getting. And he was always like a ton of fun to watch in Japan. So I thought we'd have a guy that stuck around for a while until he really started to get old, picked up a few good wins, but never really made like serious waves in such a crowded division. And I guess I still feel the same way about him because it's still men's bantamweight. He's 3-1 with 1 no contest, and the people he's beaten they've been some solid fighters, but yeah, here he's going to take on another guy that's almost a full decade younger than him. While Henry is a good athlete himself, Jourdain is one of the best athletes in the division. He's one of the best athletes in the UFC. I mean, he is explosive, blindingly fast, powerful, coordinated, all those things. But I'm trying to think of the best comparison for Jourdain. Like, it's not an exact 1-to-1 comparison, but I think of someone like prime Edson Barboza, where if you let him dictate the pace and the distance, he is absolutely breathtaking and picks up just some indelible highlight reel finishes. But someone who can make him uncomfortable, put him on his back foot, dictate the pace, the tempo, the distance to him, just he kind of goes inert and just like, it seems like he's never fought before. It's the weirdest thing. And I think that's the main reason why this is pick 'em, because in terms of skills, in terms of age and where their physical gifts are right now, Jourdain should outmatch Henry badly, but you can say that about almost all of Jourdain's opponents, and he's under 500 in the UFC right now. I'm feeling Henry on this one. Henry is exactly the kind of guy that I think has seen what it takes to beat Charles Jourdain and can replicate that. So I'm looking for Henry to strike with Jourdain, but try to be moving forward, try to go first, mix in takedown attempts, or at least feinted takedown attempts, to give Jourdain something to think about, something to, again, one more thing for Jourdain's computer to have to process that's going to, keep him from launching his most dangerous attacks on the feet. Yeah, give me Henry to win 2 rounds out of 3. And while I am rarely the type to like call for a split decision in advance, this one has splitter written all over it to me. One of the ones where Henry wins 2 rounds out of 3, but none of the 3 official judges agreed on which the 2 rounds were that he won. So that kind of fight for me, and Henry gets his hand raised.
Well, the advantage of calling a split decision is you say it was really close if the other guy wins, but like, yeah, dude, I call a split decision, which is like saying like you have confidence in the other guy. So I kind of know win either way.
That's exactly right.
It's like horseshoes. Like, I was close.
Yeah.
Dude, this fight's bananas. I mean, like you said, I mean, any Jourdain fight is bananas, but at this point the crowd should be fully in attendance, and Jourdain, I mean, the guy you talked about, he's so freaking athletic. Dude can fight out of both stances, high volume striker. I mean, his pace against Shane Burgos was like absolutely crazy. Quick hands, he's explosive. He's got this really sharp left hand from the southpaw stance. I love that he throws, well, I shouldn't say, he loves that he throws lead uppercuts, which is just unorthodox. It doesn't bother me that much that he does it. He can overthrow his shots, which leaves him to be open for counters. He's very hittable, and my concern is he used to be a guy that he could take the damage and keep coming forward. Now his chin might be failing him, and I mean, he was recently knocked out by Gene Silva. Again, that's a loss that doesn't look too bad based on the way he's been fighting. He likes to get to the fight to the ground, though I wouldn't categorize him as a wrestler. He's definitely more of a grappler. He's a good grappler. One thing he does is he looks for guillotines. He did against Josh Kulabau. He caught Lando Fanata in it. He caught Hikaru Hamos in one of the best, guillotines I've ever seen. So that's fun, but the problem is that puts you on your back. I'll give him credit. He went against Shane Burgos, and he was, getting out of submission attempts, but he was subbed by Julian Erosa. So he's not bulletproof there. If taken down, he's got a good get-up game, good at scrambling. He doesn't just play jiu-jitsu. And we've seen him before. He's got incredible cardio, won't stop for all 50 minutes. And I being in a home country, I expect it to be even more. Victor Henry, like, this guy's so inconsistent. I mean, he looks great one fight and looks terrible the next. He is a very good athlete. He moves well. He's got nice output. He's a bit of a builder. He gets stronger as the fight goes along. He's definitely more technical than Jourdain. He sets up his shots well with feints. He switches stances in mid combination, which I like. He doesn't have the biggest power. That's probably one of the negatives about his game. But I like his kicking game. Big kicking game, kicks to all areas of the body, especially hard body kicks. I go back to the Tony Gravely fight. He was beating him with teep kicks up the middle. I mean, the guy will throw an axe kick, kind of pointless, but throw an axe kick. He's not a great offensive wrestler, which is too bad because if he gets the fight to the ground, he's a good grappler. I mean, he's got 8 subs on his record. He did show like really good hip control in his fight against Tony Gravely and good strong takedown defense and a guy who really wants to wrestle. If taken down, he's hard to hold on. And he does well to get back up. I've also seen him hit sweeps. You like this fight? You said it's pretty much a pick'em. Right?
It is a pick'em. Yep.
Okay. I'm glad because I don't feel like I have a good like sense of this fight. I really flip flopped on this one. I think both guys are very similar. Henry is a little more technical, while I think Jourdain has the ability to end the fight. You went split decision. I'm going split decision too because it's fun to do split decision, but also like I think we're gonna have an absolute war. I have zero confidence in my pick, but I'm also feeling Henry just because I think Jourdain has shown some signs that he might be like durability might be an issue, and his game is so centered around being durable. So give me Henry, but I don't have a lot of confidence in picking him by split decision.
We head next to the women's flyweight division as Ariane Lipski faces off against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Lipski, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 17-9 overall. She's an even 6-6 since joining the UFC as the former KSW women's flyweight champ. She's coming in off a loss. She dropped a decision to Karine Silva at UFC on ESPN Nicolau versus Perez back in April. That snapped a 3-fight win streak for her, comprising all 3 of her fights of 2023. So she'll look to start a new win streak here heading into the new year, and she will need to get past Jasudavicius to do so. Jasudavicius, 35-year-old Canadian, is 11-3 overall. She is 5-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. She is on a 2-fight win streak since losing a decision to Tracy Cortez last September. She has wins over Priscilla Cachoeira at UFC 297 in January and a decision win over Fatima Klein at UFC on ESPN Namajunas versus Cortez in July. Odds here favor the Canadian pretty strongly. She is -210, while Lipski is +170. This is a matchup between one of the bigger disappointment signings the UFC's had in the last, 5 or 7 years against one of the more pleasant surprises, at least of the Dana White's Contender Series era, at least for me. Like, I was super excited for Ariane Lipski to show up in the UFC. And I've told this story a million times, so I'll just give the very short version. I thought she would top out as the poor woman's Valentina Shevchenko, like a very good Muay Thai striker who has a sneakily strong offensive grappling and wrestling game and is, let's just say, marketable. I thought Lipski could become a star, if not a champ, for as long as, Shevchenko was there. She's been nothing of the kind. She's come close to washing completely out of the UFC a couple times, even in victory over women she would have destroyed in KSW. She's looked kind of flat at this point. She doesn't even call herself the queen of violence anymore. She just calls herself the queen. When you voluntarily remove the word violence from your own nickname, that is a certain kind of reality check, a certain kind of introspection. But Lipski has turned things around to a certain extent and has just embraced becoming a round winner instead of a highlight reel finish machine. Like her 3-fight win streak last year. JJ Aldrich, Melissa Gatto, and Casey O'Neill are all good fighters, and she beat all 3 of them. She finished O'Neill. Problem is, I just think Jasudavicius is probably better now. Lipski might be a little quicker. Jasudavicius is one of the larger and stronger women in the division and does not have the greatest hand and foot speed. But even if Lipski is quicker, she just doesn't have the kind of lights out power it seemed like she had 5 or 6 years ago. And just about everything else I think favors Jasudavicius. Jasudavicius has done a pretty good job so far fighting on the feet, fighting to her best advantage, given her frame, her reach, and the speed deficit she has against other fighters. She's fought numerous women that are short, compact, and explosive. Kay Hansen, Miranda Maverick. She's fought women that are almost as big as her, people like Priscilla Cachoeira. And she's been fine, at least kind of like held her own on the feet each time out. And then, yeah, she's a good wrestler, like an actual schooled, former competitive amateur wrestler. And it shows. She's one of the few women in the UFC right now that actually has just good textbook wrestling. And she is kind of a bully when she gets on top. I just think that's a bad matchup for Lipski at this point. Lipski, even in her absolute prime when she was wrecking people in KSW, did not have great takedown defense. She racked up a great win streak there, either by knocking people out on the feet before they could take her down, or doing stuff like throwing up submissions from her back, trying to sweep people. But I mean, she's never been a great defensive wrestler. And here I think Jasudavicius is probably just going to have a very Jasmine Jasudavicius fight against her. If Lipski gets a chance to operate in space, get on her horse a little bit, peck at Jasudavicius, get out of the way of danger, I could see her winning rounds that way. And hell, if she can do it for 2 rounds, she wins the fight. I just don't think she will. I think Jasudavicius has multiple ways to kind of snuff out Lipski's offense on the feet, either just shoving her to the fence, making her wear her weight, mashing her with elbows and knees, or just taking her down away from the fence, parking in top position, beating her up. They're in Canada, so it's not like people are going to be booing the second they hit the ground, and refs are going to feel peer pressure to stand them up. Give me Jasmine Jasudavicius to win maybe all 3 rounds, at least 2 out of 3, get the decision, and the crowd in Edmonton will go crazy. Like, she rattled off some highlight reel knockout when really all she did was soundly out wrestle a smaller woman.
Yeah, this fight. I mean, Ariane Lipski is not as good as we originally thought she was when she came to the UFC, but I think she's shown that she's much better than what people thought she was after she lost to Priscilla Cachoeira. Like, she's somewhere in between. Like, she's definitely UFC level. Where at one point, we thought she could be a future champion or high contender. She's not that, but then she's also not the very lowest level in the UFC. A concern I have with her is just the amount of damage she's taken. She's taken a lot of damage. Now she's a volume striker on the feet. She's got some quick hands, a lot of variety in her striking, big kicking game. She's a strong clinch fighter. Because she got that Muay Thai background. She gets in there. She's looking for knees inside. I think she's a better wrestler than she originally credited. When she first came to UFC, her wrestling was really bad. She's gotten takedowns against JJ Aldridge, who's, underrated fighter herself, got a takedown against Melissa Gatto. So she's shown some improvements. Her takedown defense, which was even worse. I mean, she stopped takedowns against JJ Aldridge, stopped takedowns against Casey O'Neill. She's, we always think about her kickboxer, but she's not a bad grappler. She's got 5 subs on her record. I mean, she subbed Casey O'Neill. What I loved about, she caught it in the scramble. Jasudavicius, I mean, she's I get the hype wasn't on her, but she was someone that I kind of liked coming off the contender series. Not like I always thought that there was a ceiling, and I kind of feel like she's reached her ceiling. But she's a tough out. She's someone I bet you when you get a call, you're a female at home, you get a call, and you're like, the name's Jasmine Jasudavicius. You don't feel like you can say no, but you're not excited. You're like, shit. Like, even if I win, she's gonna make it nasty and grindy. And she's big for the weight class. She's long in length. She's very physically strong. She wins many of her matches by being more physical than her opponent, but also having great fight IQ. She knows what she's good at. She just goes there. She marches down an opponent. She has nice volume, long jab. Now, she's hittable. She keeps her chin high in the air. She struggles with good athletes. Like, she really struggled with the speed of Tracy Cortez. She's been hurt, especially to the body. But if she can close distance, she can grind. She uses her size so well inside, batters with knees against her opponent. She's a solid wrestler. And her threat of wrestling opens up opportunities to land on the feet. When she gets to the clinch, though, she will try to get the fight to the ground, body locks, trip takedowns, just drop down on the hips and pull the legs out. She's good at sometimes just creating a scramble and winning those scramble. She's got good top control, strong top game. I always go back to I think the perfect example of her game is the Miranda Maverick fight, where you have someone who's a better athlete than her, but couldn't get her off her. Like she was on her and frustrated. You can see the frustration in Miranda Maverick's face. Hard ground and pound on top. The one problem I have with her game is that she's not a submission threat. I love Lipski. I like that she's kind of turned her career around a little bit. I know she lost her last fight, but it's kind of showed that she wasn't a complete wash in the UFC. But dude, this is Jasudavicius. I think is a terrible stylistic matchup for her. I mean, she's a terrible stylistic matchup for a lot of people, but I think she gets the clinch. I think she batters there. I think she constantly drags Lipski to the ground. I think she holds her down and dominates her from on top. I think the fight's gonna look a lot like the Miranda Maverick fight, where Jasudavicius is just controlling and strong. They might even get like a 10-8 round, beat her up with ground and pound. Give me Jasudavicius in a lopsided decision.
Next up at UFC Edmonton, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a men's bantamweight matchup between Aiemann Zahabi and Pedro Munhoz. Zahabi, the 36-year-old Canadian, is 11-2 overall. He is 5-2 in the UFC, and he is on a 4-fight win streak. That's the good news. The bad news is that it stretches back all the way to 2020 because this will be the first time he's fought twice in a year in the UFC since 2017. Nonetheless, he did fight already this year, taking a unanimous decision over Javid Basharat in March at UFC Fight Night, Rosenstrike versus Gaziev. Major feather in the cap for him to hand one of the Basharat brothers his first professional loss. And as I mentioned, that puts him on a 4-fight win streak himself. He will look to make it 5 at the expense of Pedro Munhoz. 38-year-old Brazilian is 20-9 with 2 no contests overall. He is 10-9 with 2 no contests in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak. He fought once this year already, dropping a unanimous decision to Kyler Phillips at UFC 299 in March. Prior to that, you have to go all the way back to last August, where he lost a decision to Marlon Vera at UFC 292. So Munhoz, possibly in the twilight of his career, but still out there fighting tough guys every time out. And Zahabi is yet another of them. Despite the contrasting momentum between the streaking Zahabi and the plummeting Munhoz, despite Munhoz being slightly older, even before taking into account the amount of punishment the young Punisher has taken, Munhoz is a slight favorite here. He is minus 130, Zahabi plus 100 or plus 110 as your underdog. Keith, I was a little surprised to see that money line, to the point that I kind of paused our preview here to make sure that I had transcribed it correctly. But yeah, Munhoz is your favorite over Zahabi. Does Zahabi get his 5th straight win, or does Munhoz his 3rd straight loss, or do both of them snap those streaks?
Oh man, toss this to me first. This fight, so Pedro Munhoz was like one of my favorite fighters, like, a couple of years ago. He was a high output striker that marched down his opponents and just kind of forced them on their back foot, where pace was the ultimate tool, despite, not being a great athlete, despite being high in the rankings. He just was like a pace guy. And the problem is his pace is starting to slow, and all those years of beating guys with pressure where he has to take a lot of damage to do it is really starting to get him. And he lost against Jose Aldo because he refused to step on the gas. That fight was right there, winning before him. Good Pedro Munhoz, if he still has, the one thing about Pedro Munhoz, say what you want, and you said it, is, yeah, he's lost some fights recently, but he's fought really, really good guys. I mean, I remember being in attendance when he fought Marlon Vera, and Vera beat him and got a title shot for it, and thinking, I thought Munhoz won that fight. It was really, not the greatest fight, especially for those two guys, two known action guys. But so I got to ask myself, has he really fallen off, or is it just he, this is the, upper echelon guy fighting upper echelon guys? When he's letting his hands go, he's got a good jab. He works behind it. He falls into the pocket around those big shots. He's always a guy that's willing to eat, a shot to land one of his own. He's had a solid chin. Still to this day, he still has a pretty solid chin. But it's, it's been tested. I mean, Aljamain Sterling teed off on him. That's because he just never has the best technique. He kind of really squares himself up, makes himself a big target. He does have good power. He still has like old man power. He's got a great kicking game, kicks to the body, and, throws hard leg kicks. But what's concerning against Phillips, like he wasn't throwing those leg kicks, and that's the one weapon I'm still really high on. And he's always been open to leg kicks himself. Like Aljo beat him up with leg kicks. He doesn't wrestle often, but it's too bad because he's an underrated wrestler. But to his credit, he's starting to wrestle some more. I shouldn't say some wrestling more, but he's looking for wrestling more. He's not executing his wrestling. He tried getting Phillips down several times. He was getting to the hips. He just wasn't exploding through him, which is concerning, which, if he's losing an explosion, it could be an issue. Zahabi, he hasn't been the most active guy, but the dude still hasn't lost in over 5 years. Like, that's impressive. He doesn't get a lot of fanfare because, he's your classic tri-star fighter. He's a technical striker, boxer who has low output, a lot of single strikes. Yeah, ultimately, if they can work from distance and throw a jab and win the round by having 14 strikes landed to 12, like that's the kind of fight they want. He follows up his punches with straight punches on the pipe. I like his straight right hand. He was landing a lot in his last fight. He showed against Drake Rodriguez. He has some power left. He does good to throw a lot of kicks. Kicks are a big part of his game. Again, I should say a lot of kicks because output's not a part of the game, but he'll throw kicks. He's got good calf kicks. He does keep his head a little too high for my liking, and he lacks head movement, which is an issue. He'll close the distance. He'll grind in the clinch. He's got no problems there. He likes to land like little short knees and elbows inside. He'll drop down the hips and look to get the fight to the ground. Though I wouldn't call him a wrestler. I actually say he's probably a weaker defensive wrestler, but he's good at scrambling to get back to his feet, and he is a little bit of a submission threat. Man, just talking about Zahabi is like it just sucked the life out of the show. Sucked the life out of me. I used to love Munhoz, but the question I asked is he losing to high level competition, but he's still that good? He's just instead of being the 8th best in the world, now he's the 17th best in the world, or is he a guy that's completely faded? You could still lose to Zahabi and still be really good. I think Zahabi has really shown that he's an underrated guy. I think Zahabi's underrated, but his style is so boring. I think we get a point kickboxing match. And at this point in his career, that might be best for Munhoz. For a guy, if he can, work from distance, work his own jab, throw some kicks. I never do this. I have no really good read on this fight. I'm going to take Munhoz just because I want him to win. Give me Munhoz by split decision. Again, and before, when I say I want him to win, I get nothing against Zahabi. Like, I don't think he's a bad person or anything. It's just, I've never been a try. Rory McDowell had some really fun moments, and obviously George St. Pierre, but generally speaking, the rest of them are just, they're all the same guys. And
yeah. It's there is a tri-star formula, and you would expect the younger brother of the head coach to be the prototype for it. And
every time, like when you're like, you've been in a wrestling room or something, you're like, all right, I'm gonna show a move. You always call like the same kid. Hey, come out. You don't think he calls his brother every time?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Zahabi has, he's had flashes of fun moments, but if the fight's that much fun, he's usually getting the worst of it. of course, he took his first career loss back at UFC 217. I can't even imagine that. Like, it's UFC 217, the opening fight of the night. Firas Zahabi watches his brother just get absolutely iced by a spinning back elbow from Ricardo Ramos.
Oh,
6 hours later, his greatest pupil, beats Michael Bisping for the middleweight title. He's the whole span of human emotion. Yeah, it's the same. And the first and last fights on the card of the same night.
Yeah, I remember that because I have a friend. I mean, the guy's he's the funnest guy to be around, but he gets drunk. He has no problem spending money. He bets huge, and he's asking me betting, and I'm like concerned. I'm like, ugh. And he's winning, and he's throwing me $100. I remember saying he bet on Rose Namajunas. I never told him to bet on Rose. He said, well, what he was saying, he didn't know anything. I'm like, well, I'm like, I don't like the odds on that. Like, that's too big of a favorite to bet on. Never said to bet on Rose. He did. And then he's like, this guy's a genius. He's throwing me $100 bills. God knows how much he won.
That's awesome.
Still to the day, the only person who tips me when they get betting advice from me. Not that I give betting advice, but
yeah. We're at pains to tell you, folks.
That's why I remember that.
Yeah. I completely agree with your overall take on the fight.
Oh, hold on a second. I'm sorry. I met my friends. There's actually been people on here who's tossed us.
Yeah.
So I didn't want. I met my regular people, friends I know.
Yeah, like listeners who won some money, will occasionally tip us on the recap. Which, I mean, we appreciate it as a gesture. Never required, always appreciated. But Munhoz is a guy that is, generally speaking, a reliably entertaining fighter, but so were Draco Rodriguez, Ricky Tercios, and Auri Chileng before Zahabi ran into him. He's capable of making just about anything into an Aiemann Zahabi fight. And I don't have a strong take on this one either, which makes sense since the line is so close. But I'm going to lean the other way in what I guess, at least as of right now, is a tiny upset. But Munhoz leaving some of his best weapons in the holsters against Phillips is a little concerning to me, because that is the kind of in-fight decision that makes me think, okay, yeah, there's a good chance this turns into an Aiemann Zahabi fight. Give me Zahabi to win a decision here, and I could totally, again, see it being a splitter, because if one guy lands 8 strikes in a round and the other guy lands 11, but a couple of the 8 were harder, all of a sudden you have a tough round to score. We might have 3 of those here. Give me Zahabi just to eke out a decision here. The 6-fight main card of UFC Fight Night 246 begins with a welterweight matchup between proper Mike Malott and Trevin Giles. Malott, the 32-year-old Canadian, is 10-2-1 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He already fought once this year. It was at UFC 297 back in January, where he picked up the first loss of his UFC run, getting pounded out by Neil Magny late in the 3rd round. He will look to bounce back from that and reestablish himself as a welterweight to be reckoned with going forward, and he's going to try to do it against Giles. Giles, also 32 years old, fighting out of Houston, Texas, is 16-6 overall. He is 7-6 in the UFC. He is 2-3 since moving down to welterweight. He began in the UFC as a middleweight, had decent success there, but decided that his best future lay at 170 pounds. He dropped to 170 almost 3 years ago. And as I said, he's 2-3 since, and he's on a 2-fight losing streak, both by finish. Going back to last July, he got guillotined quickly by Gabriel Bonfim. Then he came back this February at UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Pfeiffer, and got knocked out by Carlos Prates in the 2nd round. So he's looking to snap the losing streak here. He is not favored to do so, to say the least. In fact, I'm pretty sure Malott is the biggest favorite on the entire card, as he is coming in at -270, Giles +220. If you're watching this show and this is not the first time you've watched it, you already know my thing. I'm kind of a shameless homer for Texas fighters in general, Houston fighters in particular, people whom I know personally, or at least whose coaches I know personally, even more so. Giles checks all those boxes. I've interviewed him in person. I know his coach, Jamey-Lyn of War MMA pretty well. He's been a Houston guy forever. Having said that, I'm going with Malott here, but I wouldn't be comfortable taking Malott as an almost 3-1 favorite against someone as dangerous as Giles. Because here's the thing. The book on Giles has been the same since he got to the UFC, and frankly, even since he was fighting in LFA here in Texas before the UFC. He's an offensively gifted fighter who can do a little bit of everything. He's a good striker with good power, good hand speed. He's an athletic guy. He is a good offensive wrestler when he decides to be. He's won fights in the UFC just by grounding people over and over again, if that's what it takes to win. But as I've said before, kind of like the Death Star with that little thermal exhaust port, Giles will have defensive lapses or just lapses in attention during the fight. And if his opponent is talented enough, has enough presence of mind to take advantage of those, Giles loses. And when he loses big. He was beating Gerald Meerschaert until he ran into a guillotine in the third round. He was beating Dricus du Plessis. He won the first round against Dricus du Plessis, your current middleweight champ. Du Plessis.
In fairness, everybody does.
Yeah, granted, but it was a perfect meeting of what du Plessis does versus what Giles does, because du Plessis caught him with one punch, and while that punch didn't win the fight, it effectively ended the fight. Giles was on from there.
And before people come at me, I know he hasn't lost rounds to everybody. It's just a joke about his style.
Yeah.
I mean, that one guy, what are you talking about, dude? He won on all three judges. That was just a joke.
Yeah.
We'll talk for 3 hours. I'll correct the one thing we said wrong. Dude, you said this guy was a bantamweight, but you forgot that he switched to featherweight. All right, cool.
That's Giles. And at this point, that's probably what Giles is going to be until the wheels fall off. I mean, he's still only 32 years old. And while it's fair to ask if his chin is compromised, he's been knocked out badly in some of his losses. And Carlos Prates one-shotted him, which is something that had not been happening to him even at middleweight. Again, Dricus du Plessis, who's a 185er and hits like a truck, took multiple punches, whereas Carlos Prates just shut him off. Here's the thing, though. Like, Giles's liabilities don't really line up very well with the things that Malott does best. But at the same time, we just saw Malott lose, but the way that Malott lost doesn't really line up with Giles, with what Giles does best either. Like,
that's right.
Malott got Neil Magni'd. He was winning. He was looking great. He started to get tired. Magny started to figure him out. Magny woke up about 7 minutes into the fight. And I mean, we were cruising for a 10-8 round, that third round, but Magny's so relentless. It looked like Magny destroying Hector Lombard all over again. That's going to happen for as long as Neil Magny could be 53 years old and still in the UFC. There's a welterweight on the roster. He'll do that too. That's not how Trevin Giles wins fights. This is two kind of front runnery guys that are used to winning fights in the first 7 or 8 minutes. Like I said, Giles will always be a live dog just because he hits hard. He's an opportunistic submission threat. But right now, I've got to go with Malott. Just while he's not younger, he feels younger. He has less wear and tear than Giles. He is more defensively reliable than Giles, and he's probably more durable at this point. That all spells bad news for my guy Trevin. While it gives me no joy to pick it, give me Malott by second round TKO here. I expect a real fun first round. Hell, maybe Giles hurts Malott and looks great, but again, in a fight between two guys that neither of them are that durable, Malott's the more durable of the two, and I think that's going to be the difference here.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that they're the same age, because not all 32-year-olds are the same. I mean, I made a joke when I said there's no up-and-comers, and I said, well, people look at Mike Malott that way. Dude's 32 years old, but he feels like he should be like 25. Dude, because he had the first test of his career, It is almost exactly 10 years ago right now, the first time I ever saw him fight. It was in World Series of Fighting against Hakeem Dawodu at
featherweight. He was this tall, lanky, skinny featherweight against like little chunk of muscle Hakeem Dawodu in some all Canada violence. That was 10 years ago, man.
I don't know if you say violence and Hakeem Dawodu. He probably just held him down.
No, Dawodu knocked him out.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, that's his only other loss was
from holding him down first. Yeah, and then Trevor Giles. I mean, you talk about a 32-year-old guy. I think he feels like he's at the end of his career, and he's only 32. So, I mean, this fight, I wasn't a Malott believer. Like, I actually was one of the few people who picked Neil Magny. Not that I was like, I'm not trying to like toot my horn on that upset, but now I feel like one of the people who is like one of his biggest supporters, because it seems like so many people jumped off the bandwagon, but now suddenly he stinks, he sucks. I think you said it perfectly. He just got Neil Magny. Neil Magny, that's what he does, and he can make a couple adjustments and he wins that fight. He's a good athlete. He was winning. He was doing well. He was looking really good early. He's a good athlete. He's got good movement, good footwork. He likes to fight at a slower pace. He wants to work from the outside. Nice crisp jab. He likes to double it up. He's got pretty good power. He can overthrow his shot sometimes to try to land that big power shot. I like his kicks, especially his calf kicks. Defensively, he doesn't move his head much. He's been cracked a lot in the past. He's a good wrestler. I think he doesn't get enough credit for his overall wrestling. I like his entries. He's a pretty good grappler. He's got 5 subs on his record. He's got a great guillotine. If he's taken down, he struggles to get back up. And obviously the biggest issue is that he gassed out bad against Neil Magny in a fight that he was easily winning early and cruising. Again, I don't think he has a bad gas tank. I just think it was the moment. I think it's that you said it as like a front runner. I don't think he's a front runner. I really don't. I don't think he's a guy that when he gets bad, I just think it's like that one glimpse of self-doubt because freaking Neil Magny's that kind of guy that can draw that. I don't think other guys can do that to him. Giles, he's a really big welterweight. I mean, I've said this before. He looks like he's a light heavyweight. Technical boxer. He wants to work from distance. He moves well, good footwork, but he hates being pressured. Like I go back to like the Bonfim fight. He hated the pressure from Bonfim. He hated the pressure from Preston Parsons. Bonfim ran through him. Carlos Freitas Carlos Freitas looks like the real deal though, but he just dominated him and smoked him. He can be gun shy at sometimes. But when he lets his hands go, he's got quick hands, works behind a good jab. I mean, he likes to throw the up jab. I always go back. I mean, it's been a while ago, but I always go back to it's a stinging jab. He dropped Bevan Lewis with the jab. He was throwing a lot more combinations against Carlos Freitas, which I like. He can use his size and work in the clinch. He will sneak in a takedown. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, and he definitely doesn't wrestle enough, but it's something that he has in his back pocket. What I like is he sets up his entries with his striking. Like he has those opportunities to get takedowns, and he'll occasionally go for it. Doesn't have the best takedown defense, but he does well to use the size to get back to his feet. Though he has been subbed a couple times in the past, he has gassed out in the past. But really, the biggest issue is his durability. He could be winning a fight, and he still finds a way to get knocked out. I mean, you talk about Duplessis, but there's other fights like that where he seems to be a guy who finds ways to lose sometimes. So you said this thing where I don't pick against police officers. I'm a police officer. A lot of people know that. I don't pick against police officers. Trevin Giles was a police officer. He's not a police officer anymore. So I can pick against him. I've given up on Giles. I say Malott hurts him on the feet. I say he puts him away early. I'm going to say Malott has that. He's had moments in Canada. He has that again. He's what was it? What card was the pay-per-view where he was like, he was the star of the moment, and they wanted that his last one. I think he has it. On this card, I think he has that big moment. He reminds everyone, and he's one of the talks in the post fight. Give me Malott. I say he gets a first round TKO.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Edmonton powers on with a middleweight matchup between Marc-Andre Barriault and Dustin Stoltzfus. Guess that answers the question for you, Keith. This fight is this far up the card because Barrio is Canadian. The 34-year-old Quebecois is 16-8 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-7 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in Canada's TKO promotion. I guess both he and Charles Jourdain were 2-division champs in TKO. Barrio was a former middleweight and light heavyweight champ there, but in the UFC, again, 5-7 with 1 no contest, and he is on a 2-fight losing streak dating back to the beginning of this year. He dropped a split decision to Chris Curtis back in January at UFC 297, came back in June at UFC 303, and got knocked out in 90 seconds by Joe Pyfer. So he's looking to snap that losing streak. He will need to get past Stoltzfus to do so. Stoltzfus, 32-year-old American, though longtime resident and training out of Germany. He is 15-6 overall. He is 2-5 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. And while 2-5 doesn't sound great, he has alternated wins and losses for the last 5 fights. He's coming in off a loss. Somebody with an evil and sick sense of humor matched him up against Bruno Ferreira at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov back in June. Ferreira lamped him with a spinning back elbow in the first round. Stoltzfus will look to bounce back from that here. He's not favored to do so. Barrio is -200. Stoltzfus plus 170. These are two guys that I would have put down money wouldn't be in the UFC anymore in October of 2024. Barrio lost his first 3 fights in the UFC, and while they were all to decent fighters, none of them were great fights. I figured he'd be gone, but instead he's around. He's inching towards 500 in the UFC, and he's better than he used to be. He used to be a guy that was well-rounded only in the sense of kind of being mediocre at everything. He has improved. And at age 34, he's probably fighting the best he ever has, even though he got wrecked by Joe Pyfer his last time out. But that's the thing. Barrio used to lose fights just through sheer inertia. I mean, he lost to people like Andrew Sanchez and Jun Young Park in just these miserable grind fests where he is a born grinder himself, but he just ran into someone who was a little better than him at it. That's kind of gone away. And recently, he's only lost to people that are definitely better than he is, or at least can take advantage of his one big remaining weakness. And that is kind of like Trevin Giles that we just talked about. You can jump on him early, and if you can hurt him, you can get him out of there. Joe Pyfer knocked him out in under 90 seconds. Chidi and Jokwani knocked him out in under 20 seconds. Then beyond that, Chris Curtis, even having lost a few, is still kind of like a borderline top 15-ish talent at 185, and he beat Barrio. Anthony Hernandez is, it turns out, maybe a top 5 talent at 185 pounds, and he was better than Barrio at everything. So we know what Barrio's ceiling is, but we also know what his floor is, because he doesn't lose to bad fighters. And the people that have been beating him, Dustin Stoltzfus doesn't have any of those things in his tool bag. Like, Stoltzfus has done better than I expected. He actually has won a couple fights in the UFC at this point. Like, when he lost to Rodolfo Vieira and Gerald Meerschaert, like the way he did, I was like, this guy is one of the worst fighters the UFC has signed, even during the COVID era. What the hell are we even doing here? Because it's one thing to lose to Gerald Meerschaert, but it's another thing if Gerald Meerschaert is outstriking you from the get-go and is like the faster guy, and that's not a good look.
Meerschaert can get beat up first.
Yeah. Like, normally you're supposed to beat Gerald Meerschaert up first, but no, that wasn't the case.
Or he catches you in a submission. If you get caught in a submission, so be it. But you can't get outstruck by Gerald Meerschaert.
Yeah, he got outstruck by Gerald Meerschaert for most of 3 rounds. So Stoltzfus isn't gonna, like, there's nothing in his body of work, even when he was fighting back in second-tier promotions in Germany, that makes me think he's going to come out and head kick Marc-Andre Barrio in 2 minutes. It's just not what he does. When he has eked out wins, it's been by hanging around in the striking, waiting for an opportunity to bring things to the ground, because he's not a huge guy Oh, he wasn't huge at 170. He's definitely not huge at 185, but surprisingly strong and a surprisingly effective wrestler, all things considered. That's how he beat Dwight Grant. It's how he beat Puna Soriano. I don't think he can do that to Barrio. Barrio isn't a great athlete, but he's a big, strong dude. Uh, and like I say, he's not like a former American college wrestler. He's not shooting doubles from the outside, but he's just a born grinder. The ideal Marc-Andre Barrio fight takes place entirely outside that warning track within like 2 feet of the fence. I think we're more likely to get that than any permutation of a fight that lets Stoltzfus get Barrio out of there early. And while Stoltzfus has shown, I mean, if he gets past the first round, like decent durability, the same can be said for Barrio. Just, I think Barrio's probably a little better than Stoltzfus at everything except maybe offensive wrestling. And on top of everything else, Barrio's bigger and stronger. So give me Barrio by decision here. And yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with this one. There's just not going to be much that Stoltzfus can do, I don't think.
The big mystery is like, why is this fight so high in the card? Like the next 2 fights, like,
dude, it's because Barrio's Canadian, I swear.
Yeah, but I mean, like, give Jasudavicius a higher fight on the card. Give shit. I mean, it's not gonna be a great fight, but Zahabi's on a much bigger win streak, and he's going against a much bigger name.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go by like what they're doing, Zalal and Shore should be much higher on the card. But Barrio, I mean, he's a guy he fight out of both stances. He likes to fight with a lot of pressure. He marches down his foe. He has good volume. You got, you look at the guy's built. I mean, he's got some pop in his hands, though he does load up on a lot of his shots. If he gets inside the pocket, he throws big combinations. I like his straight right. He's got a good kicking game, hard calf kicks. He hates being pressured, though, forced on his back foot. Jung Young Park forced him on his back foot, beat him there. Anthony Hernandez beat him with pressure. Anthony Hernandez beats everyone with pressure. He has some defensive holes. He uses a lot of pillaring. I have to worry about his chin. He was knocked dead by Joe Hoifer. He'll occasionally sneak in a takedown, but he's not very good at it. He did show decent takedown defense against Yako, but he couldn't stop the wrestling of Anthony Hernandez too. But again, nobody can. He struggles to get back to his feet. He's got good cardio. He can go hard all 15 minutes. Stoltzfus, he's a guy that he fights out of both stances. Not the best output. He loves his overhand right. He'll toss out some spinning attacks. He has some pop. He dropped Puna Soriano with one shot. He's got a pretty good kicking game, but he doesn't check leg kicks. He's a good wrestler though. He wrestles a lot. He's got pretty good, takedown defense. If he gets to fight to the ground, he's got some slick, he got some slick grappling. I mean, he took the back of Dwight Grant. He's got 8 submissions. He got a knee bar in one fight. He got a leg lock, a twister. He subbed Puna Soriano. I am worried about his durability, though. I mean, he was knocked out by Abus Magomedov and recently by Bruno Ferreira. You're much more confident in this fight than I am. I have a really hard time picking this one. I don't really have a good read on either guy. On the feet, I favor Barrio, especially because Stoltzfus has a lot of durability issues. Stoltzfus should have the advantage in the wrestling. I think it's going to be a really close fight. I'm going to say Stoltzfus' takedown is going to be the difference. Give me Stoltzfus. I'm going to say he wins by decision.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 246 main card, I said off the top that there were 3 heavyweight fights on this card. Need to correct that. There are 2 heavyweight fights and 1 light heavyweight fight featuring a heavyweight moving down. And I should have looked more closely at my notes. That light heavyweight fight is up next, as it is Caio Machado dropping to light heavyweight to face Brenjison Ribeiro. Machado, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 8-3-1 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series last August. Since then, he has dropped unanimous decisions to Mick Parkin and Don'Tale Mayes. Those setbacks have apparently convinced him that his best future lies at 205 pounds, and that's what he's going to try this Saturday in Edmonton. he will look to get his first UFC win against a fellow Dana White's Contender Series graduate who is looking for the same thing. Ribeiro, 28-year-old Brazilian, is 15-7 with 1 no contest overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC, also out of season 7 of the Contender Series. He has a first-round knockout loss to Zhang Mingyang and a majority decision loss to Magomed Gajiazulov on his ledger so far. So he's looking to get in the win column in the octagon for the first time as well. He is not favored to do so, but the line is fairly close as Machado is minus 160, Ribeiro plus 130. And I've got to say, like, Caio Machado, he's fought in the UFC twice. He's weighed in around 250 pounds both times. And he's not built like Alexander Romanov or Sergey Spivak or something. He has a little bit more of like a narrow-shouldered, long-limbed frame. I mean, he's not quite as titanic, but it's closer to the Johnny Walker, Walter Walker type build than to the like, Justin Taffa type build. So if, man, he fought it in April and he weighed in at 252 pounds, I'm like, okay, that's 6 months he has to drop enough weight that he can make a reasonable water cut to 206. Given what we know of UFC level light heavyweights, that means he needs to get from 250 or 255 down to probably around 230 in order to make a feasible water cut. I'm interested. I'm interested to see if he makes it. Based on what I've seen, I don't see top 10 upside for him in either weight class. But honestly, if he's going to become a future contender in either division, I would say it's probably at heavyweight. He'd be better served to stay at heavyweight and just work on his skills. He's a big guy, even for the heavyweight division. He's 6'4", 250 pounds with a big wingspan. I think in his head, he would prefer an out kickboxing battle, but when opponents don't oblige him with that, he does have good weapons inside. I just don't think he's quite as defensively sound inside. And he can be bullied at heavyweight, but in fairness to him, his 2 UFC losses have been to Mick Parkin and Dontel Mays. I'm not sure either of those guys is a world beater, but they're 2 of the physically bigger guys in the division, especially Mays. Mays is absolutely monstrous. I just wonder if this is like a premature move on Machado's part, because at 205, he's not going to be necessarily faster than most of his opponents. And who knows, he'll have more people he runs into there that have actual wrestling technique, not just big bully approaches. Who knows what that'll do to his durability. But if he wants to give this a shot, Ribeiro is as good an opponent as anybody to try it against, because Ribeiro so far in the UFC has not looked great. Magomed Gajiazulov may end up being a real good fighter in the UFC, but Zhang Mingyang probably isn't, and Mingyang lamped him, and he did it early, and it's because while Ribeiro wants to strike, he has like some bad defensive lapses. Keith will probably be able to draw those X's and O's better for me, but just you look at him losing to Mingyang and just his hands aren't anywhere near his face. It just looked like a fight in the parking lot. Here, assuming Machado makes the weight cut and has anything left to offer, I favor him in this one as a guy who will be physically bigger, fairly quick and athletic, might be a harder hitter. And while both of these guys have defensive problems on the feet, I think that's more likely to tell on Ribeiro as the smaller guy and the guy that we've seen get knocked out by fighters that aren't anywhere near the hitter Machado is. So give me Machado here, and I'm going to say he gets a first round knockout, but no outcome here would shock me, including a first round knockout the other way. And half the suspense for me is going to be seeing what Machado looks like on Friday even before, he gets into the cage. Like, what does the weight cut look like? What's his body look like at light heavyweight? But yeah, give me Machado by first round knockout here.
Yeah, I mean, this fight is thrown on the main card just because they're like love for big guys and possible knockouts. And I mean, Shadow, yeah, I'm wondering how he's gonna do at light heavyweight. He's a southpaw. He's definitely a brawler. He loves to get in the pocket and throw really hard. He can be wild at times, not very tactical, very, very sloppy. Though he was a little more technical against Mick Parkin, a little more controlled. I actually thought he won that fight. So he does a lot of looping shots, constantly throwing that overhand right. If he connects with it, he can put you out. He's got big power. He likes to work the body, which I like. He throws a lot of kicks. Not much of an offensive wrestler, but his BJJ isn't too bad. I mean, he's got back-to-back subs. He did slow down against Dontel Mays, though I think getting down to – well, it's concerning. Like, he's getting down to light heavyweight, taking some weight off, going to improve his cardio. Like, I'm sure it's going to improve his cholesterol and stuff. But on the same sense, like, if it's a good cut, is he going to drain himself down? That's concerning. I mean, he's got the weight to lose. I think I'm a little higher than you are.
Hey, can I interject one thing here real quick? I remember why this fight's on the main card. Machado trains and has fought out of Canada for a while. That's why they're gonna treat him like a
Canadian. Like,
yeah, but anyway, yeah,
but the thing is, like, the main card, like, putting Canadians on the card gets the people in the room to watch it. You already got them in the room. It's the people at home that matters to keep them sticking around. When you're about to, it's Saturday night, or Saturday, I don't know what time it would be, like, 9:00 at night, 10:00 at night. Do I want to go out? Oh no, this fight's coming up. I'm gonna at least stick around for that fight. I think he's fairly well rounded. He's got this incredible reach. I mean, he's an 81-inch reach, which is like John Jones level. He works from the outside. He's a bit unorthodox. He's wild. He can throw too many single shots though. But to his credit, he can land from like a mile away. He's a bit of a brawler when he should be a point distance, fighter. He mixes punches and kicks together well. He's got big power. He's got 9 TKOs. He's got a great high kick. He loves his teep kick. He's got good calf kicks. He is heavy on his front foot, which leaves him open to leg kicks. He keeps his chin high, very high in the air. He's been knocked out in the past. He will wrestle, but he isn't great at it. He has mean ground and pound. He's got 6 subs on his record. He's a weak defensive wrestler though, and he jumps guillotine. He also struggles to get off his back, and he gassed bad against Zalal, for obviously his name. I expect this fight to stay on the feet. Both guys can have their moments where they look good. I think power is a great equalizer. You're favoring Machado on that. I'm favoring Ribeiro. I'm going the other way. I think Ribeiro lands a big shot, and I think he ends it. Give me Ribeiro by first round TKO.
There you have it, folks. Not just disagreement, but dueling first round knockouts one way or the other. So check in for the recap because, one of us will be hiding. Third from the top at UFC Edmonton is a heavyweight matchup between Derek Lewis and Jonathan Diniz. Lewis, the 39-year-old Houstonian, is 28-12 with 1 no contest overall. He is 20-10 in the UFC, and he is coming in off a win. He appeared most recently back in May in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 56, where he knocked out Rodrigo Nascimento, whom we already talked about a little while ago, in the 3rd round. That allowed him to put in the rear view a pretty demoralizing and difficult to watch decision loss to Jailton Almeida about a year ago. So Lewis, even having cheerfully admitted back in May that he's getting too old for this shit, is looking for yet another win, perhaps looking to extend his all-time lead as the UFC's all-time knockout king by 1 more, but he's going to have to do it against Diniz. 33-year-old Brazilian is a perfect 8-0 as a professional. He's a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC out of Dana White's Contender Series last fall. He made his debut in the UFC in April, knocking out Austin Lane in the second round. He came back in August and took a unanimous decision over Carl Williams. So Deniz will be looking to stay perfect both in the UFC and overall, and he is moderately favored to do so. Deniz is minus 175, Lewis plus 150 as your underdog. All the things I said about Trevin Giles a little while ago hold true for Derek Lewis as well. Obviously he is the icon of Houston MMA, maybe Texas MMA period, unless you're old school enough to remember Evan Tanner or something. Having said that, he's 39, pushing 40. This is his 31st UFC fight, and he's taken a ton of punishment over the years. He himself admits that he's in the final phase of his career, but even if he's not at the level he was 5 years ago, he's still a dangerous guy, and it still isn't just anybody who can come along and add Derek Lewis as a notch on their belt. You look at the people that have beaten Lewis recently, and it becomes pretty obvious that Lewis is just sort of an older and diminished version of his prime self of 4, 5, 6 years ago. If the scouting report on Derek Lewis 5 years ago was he is one of the hardest hitters in MMA history, and he has a style that gives him plenty of chances to actually put that power on someone else's chin. He's not some heavyweight John Dodson just leaving the guns in the holsters for 15 minutes. He is deceptively hard to take down and nearly impossible to keep down, and he thrives in phone booth fights where he can trust his reflexes and durability to get him the W even over fellow hard hitters. Oh, and by the way, even though he looks like he's in just so shape and he's breathing with his mouth open in 3 minutes, he can in fact knock you out right up until the very last second of the fight. Just ask Alexander Volkov. All of those things are still true of Derek Lewis in general, in outline, but the cracks have started to appear. What we've seen over the last couple of years is people just seriously wash Derek Lewis on the ground. For the first 10 years of his UFC run, Daniel Cormier was the only guy to do that, and Cormier is one of the greatest wrestlers in MMA history. But now we saw Sergey Spivak ragdoll him all over the place and get a quick finish, where Lewis just looked discouraged and overwhelmed as this smaller guy was suplexing him all over. A year ago, we saw Jailton Almeida take Lewis down so easily and hold him down so easily that the criticism went back on Almeida for not finishing him. That's how badly he out-wrestled Lewis, is that people started criticizing Almeida for basically being able to take him down in every single round, but somehow not getting the finish. But again, those are things we didn't see happen to Lewis up until fairly recently. All of a sudden, one of the scariest phone booth fighters in MMA history has lost some fights in the phone booth. It's one thing the way he lost to Ciryl Gane, where Gane basically pitched a no-hitter on the guy. It's only because of Gane's native conservatism as a striker that he didn't finish Lewis quicker, because I don't think Lewis landed a single flush strike in almost 3 full rounds of fighting. Sergey Pavlovich just blitzed Lewis. But those guys are the exception. If Deniz beats Lewis, I don't think it's going to be a 45-second lamping, nor do I think it's just going to be an outclassing levels to this type thing like Gane did. If Deniz beats Lewis on the feet, it's going to look more like the Tai Tuivasa fight, where they were in the phone booth. Tuivasa took some of Lewis's hardest shots, recovered quicker, and came back with stuff that Lewis couldn't recover from. That's something we had not seen out of Lewis in a long time. And Deniz is probably capable of that. I mean, he's a huge guy who hits extremely hard, but nothing he has faced in his entire career is even remotely close, even to the 39-year-old Derek Lewis. If you fought your way to a matchup with Derek Lewis by knocking out Austin Lane and taking a decision over Carl Williams, you may not be ready for Derek Lewis. That's kind of what I'm feeling here. You look back, and I haven't looked at this in a while, not since he, got out of the Contender Series, but looking back at his early fights in Brazil, he was overwhelming terrible fighters and knocking him out in like a minute. He did the same thing to Eduardo Neves on the Contender Series. He did the same to Austin Lane. And while Austin Lane has some offensive gifts, he's defensively super porous, and he's a guy that's going to get knocked out a lot for as long as he's in the UFC. I mean, I get why Denise is the favorite here, but I'm not feeling it. And this isn't even just a Houston homer pick. Like, unless Derek Lewis is even more shot than I think he is, this is a bad matchup for Denise, because he would have to do the Tai Tuivasa thing to beat Lewis. Like, Denise is a hard swinging brawler with decent technique for a brawler, but yeah, he's not going to play the matador with Lewis like Gane did, where Lewis is just like running right past Gane and getting zapped on his way past him. Denise is going to have to get in close range, probably take some shots from Lewis, and hope to weather them and give Lewis back something that he can't recover from. I don't think he does it. Give me Lewis to hand Jonata Denise his first career loss, and I don't know if Lewis would just retire in the octagon in Edmonton of all places, but I do at least expect most of his clothing to come off. The guy gets more naked after every successive win. I almost hope he retires just before we get an NC-17 rated post-fight celebration, but we're at least getting to R this time as Lewis strips down to his jock, throws his cup into the crowd, and celebrates one more knockout on the biggest pile in UFC history. Second round.
Man, this Derek Lewis. Oh, this fight. All right. Derek Lewis at this point, he's nowhere near a title shot or anything like that. So, but I understand why he's on the main card. It's Derek Lewis. He deserves to be the main. Good.
This is Derek Lewis's lowest card placement since UFC 247 that had 2 title fights on it. It might be his lowest placement on a fight night card since his second fight in the UFC. The guy's been a main card dude forever.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, the notes are Derek Lewis aren't really changing. I mean, he's a big athletic heavyweight. Obviously, you're worried about his athleticism fading overnight, and I think there's been signs of that already because of his age and the damage he's taken. But he's the king of being patient and waiting, and then suddenly blitzing. I mean, I've said this a million times. He's the biggest hitter in the history of the UFC. I mean, he's got the most knockouts. He doesn't have to land clean. He just has to land and graze, and he's more accurate than he gets credited. He's good at measuring his foe and picking up his timing. I always go back to the second fight against Curtis Blades, where he starches him coming in. He lulls and then explodes. He throws a lot more kicks than people think, especially high kicks. He even throws something flying sometimes. He also has it's always been Derek Lewis gets tired. He has a much better gas tank than people have ever given him credit with. He's a guy, he looks tired, but he doesn't really fight that way. There's countless times when it seems like, okay, he's faded, he's done, he comes back. I mean, the Latifi.
Can I throw in my favorite stat? Derek Lewis is, of course, now the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts, but for 5 or 6 years now, he's already been the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts in the third round or later.
Oh, there you go.
That goes directly against everything you think about his gas tank.
Yeah, exactly. In a sense, him looking tired helps his game because it gets his opponent even more, not ready for a sudden explosion, or gives them a little more confidence. Oh, he's slowing down. I don't have to worry about his power. Early on, people were. I mean, they should be worried no matter what. It'd be crazy not to, but. Look at the Ilia Latifi fight where he was able to win this grueling battle and he won it with cardio. better cardio than the guy who is a former light heavyweight moving up. He will wrestle some. He he just uses his size and he gets the opponent to back up and then drop him, grab with the legs and drop him down. He's not shooting from the outside, but more like getting into the clinch. He was quickly subbed by Serhiy Petrovic. That was probably the worst showing he's had. But he showed improvements against Jourdain Almeida. Now hear me out. Improvements in the submission defense. Like, that fight was boring and terrible. But to Derek Lewis' credit, he was fighting off submission attempts for Jourdain Almeida for almost the entire fight. If he gets on top, obviously he's got the meanest, scariest ground and pound ever. The big concern I have him in, though, is his chin. Like, he used to have this rock hard chin, historically good chin, but we have seen him recently knocked out. Denise, he's a big striker. He hits hard. He's a little more technically sound than some people credit. He can fight at both stance, but he just marches down, accurate, massive power, big power. He defensively needs to move his head a little bit more, which is concerning, especially against like a Derek Lewis. He doesn't have much offensive wrestling skills, and he's a weak defensive wrestler, and he's got a weak get-up game if you get him down. So obviously, if this fight stays on the feet, I mean, this could be really fun. I mean, both guys having huge power. Say this about Derek Lewis. He's not dumb. Like, he's not a dumb fighter. Like, he knows what he needs to do against many guys, and he puts him in that position. I think he's going to realize, like, I probably shouldn't stand up with this guy. I should just take him down. I think he's gonna. I think Derek Lewis is going to close the distance. Maybe do like a slide by, somehow get the fight to the ground. I think he's going to ground and pound him. Give me Derek Lewis by second round TKO from ground and pounders.
You've been waiting for it, folks. The first unanimous upset pick, and it is for the unveiling of D1 Derek Lewis.
I'm surprised because we've picked a lot of underdogs. I'm surprised that it finally took us this fight to get both of us picking the same underdog.
Yeah, we've talked about 12 fights so far, and there are only 5 of them where we both picked the favorite.
Well, there you go.
There you go. That's what you get when you give us a card with no 3-1 or greater favorites on it. Like, we actually have to think about this. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 246, a women's flyweight matchup between Erin Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. Blanchfield, the 25-year-old New Jersey native, is 12-2 overall. She's 6-1 since joining the UFC a little over 4 years ago out of Invicta and CFFC. She won her first 6 fights in the octagon, confirming her status as one of the top prospects in the entire promotion before running into Manon Fior back in March in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 54. And there, in a fight with possible immediate title implications, she came up on the wrong end of a 5-round decision. So she'll look to bounce back from there, pick up a win that's, at least in name value, is even better than beating Fior would have been, in the form of Thug Rose. 32-year-old Wisconsinite fighting out of Colorado is 13-6 overall. She's 11-5 since joining the UFC out of season 20 of The Ultimate Fighter. She is a 2-time former strawweight champ who in recent years has been plying her trade up a weight class at flyweight. And she's on a 2-fight win streak. She is 2-1 since moving up to 125 pounds. She also lost to Fior. It was in her flyweight debut a little over a year ago, but since then she has unanimous decision wins over Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez to position herself as a contender in her new division. Here, yet another close money line. Blanchfield is -130, Namajunas +110 as your slight underdog. Keith, this is a great fight, man. Tell me if you disagree with that, and whether you agree or disagree, tell me who you think gets it done here.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic fight. I mean, a lot of storylines. The big one is, has Rose continued her success? If she beats Erin Blanchfield, she'd probably fight for a title in a different weight. Erin Blanchfield, this is a passing of the torch moment. Does she, get her the biggest win of her, her young career. I'm glad that the betting line is close because I think it's a really tough fight. I've liked both females a lot. Rose Namajunas, I mean, a lot of things I said about her last time. I'm gonna say again, but she's a great athlete. Historically, some of the best footwork in the history of the games. Sometimes she moves a little too much. I've always said this, like, look at that terrible fight against Kelsey Esparza. She can get that feeling that she isn't losing to. She gets little Hoyman Masvidal cruising moments if she's not getting hurt. When she's letting her hands go, she's good. I mean, she's a technical striker. She has the rare ability to land strikes while backing up. She's technically sound. She can fight at both stances, but I really like her from the southpaw stance. The issue I have lately is her volume has really declined. It feels like a little bit of like a Andrei Arlovski end of his career, found a way to sustain and be more successful. It might be that. I mean, but her volume is absolutely disappeared. She's not attacking with combinations anymore. She's throwing a lot of single strikes. She still has fast hands. She's a good distance striker, nice jab, one of the best jabs in the game, regardless of gender. She's always been a very good counter striker. She's always been pretty hard to hit with good head movement. She had great power at 150 pounds. We haven't seen it translate well to 125. And power is usually the last thing for an aging fighter to lose. But again, we haven't seen it as she's moved up to 125. I mean, she's getting thrown right to the wolves, so take that for what it's worth. She's got a good kicking game. I mean, I love her high kick. She won the second, won the title second time with a high kick. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, wait, no, she didn't hit Ioana. Did she hit Ioana with the high kick? No, it was Weili.
No, yeah. She head kicked Weili. She punched out Ioana.
Yeah, punched out Ioana.
Both times won the decision the second time. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, like, she won a title with a high kick. I've said this forever, and I think the narrative has kind of caught up to what I was saying for a long time. I mean, she's criminally underrated grappler, criminally underrated wrestler. She's a very good wrestler. She'll look for takedowns to gain position, but ultimately to win rounds. I mean, it's been a really long time ago. You just mentioned it. The perfect example is in a extremely close fight in the rematch against Jourdain Jacek. It's the fifth round. It's super close. It can go anywhere, and she gets a time. It's mostly a stand-up striking kickboxing affair, and she goes for a takedown right at the end that probably won her the fight. I mean, her takedowns helped her win her last fight. She's a overall great grappler, great at winning scrambles, advancing position on the ground. She's got good top control. Like, she has no issue with stalling. She doesn't care. She's not into it for fanfare anymore. Like the crowd, if they boo at times, like, that's not gonna bother her. I mean, we saw it against Manibas where she held her down for long periods of time, didn't do much. She is very flexible. She can get subs from both top and bottom. Great back takes. If taken down, she is hard to hold down. She gets up pretty quickly. Blanchfield, she isn't a great athlete for the top of the division. She's been a little inconsistent. Like, she wins, not inconsistent in the win column, but like, one minute I'm like blown away by her performance, the next one I'm like, I don't know if it's missing. Like, she looks super fast against Jessica Andrade, but she looked much slower against Manon Ferro and Talia Santos. Not that I think either were poor performances. I mean, she lost to Manon Ferro and beat Santos, but yes, the speed wasn't there. I like her output, though. She's got high output. She's going to use pressure, and she's going to beat her opponents. She's like a controlled slip and rip counter striker, but she's absolutely fearless. Like, she walks down her foe, doesn't care about getting hit back. She does lack power because she throws a lot of arm punches, but I mean, this girl's wicked young. So I expect her to add power when she, this year, next year, upcoming years, because that's, kind of gets to your prime. She's probably not even in her prime yet. She throws a lot of kicks, but she doesn't check leg kicks. So she's open to those. She had a great, incredible high kick against Victoria Leonardo. Man, it's really long time ago, but just still, it's probably the highlight. The best moment of her career was this incredible high kick against Victoria Leonardo. If she gets the fight to the ground, she's a really, really good grappler. I mean, she's elite on the ground. Super good. She will wrestle a lot. The problem is she isn't great at it. Though she got a bunch of takedowns against Miranda Maverick, she struggled to get other people down. She doesn't really set up her entries well. She kind of just dives in. She will grab a single and run the pipe. If she gets to fight the ground, she's scary, though. She's got a great top game, some of the best ground and pound in the game. She's got a mean streak in her, which you don't really see in the interviews and stuff. But I mean, like, go back to the Molly McCann fight where she had that nasty crucifix and dropping elbows. She's a submission artist. I mean, she's an EBI world champion. She's a BJJ black belt. She subbed McCann with this amazing Kimura. She choked out Jessica Andrade, which is an incredible feat. This is a really, really hard fight to pick. Namajunas is more technical. She's the better athlete. Blanchfield, she's younger. She's meaner. She has the better output. I have Blanchfield on our fantasy draft. I mean, does that influence my pick? I mean, my team is freaking loaded. I mean, I can't believe you guys let me get Bo Nickel 2 years in a row. But I want to pick against my own team. I think me. Did someone have Namajunas and we made a bet on it, which would be even worse. I think I bet with Jay or somebody. I think Namajunas would be smart enough to avoid the grappling, which is going to have to go against her own instincts because that's such a big part of her game. I'm worried about her output. I'm worried that Blanchfield could just overwhelm her with just volume and pressure, but she's going to have to catch her. And I think she's going to force Blanchfield to chase her for 25 minutes. And when Blanchfield stops for a second, plants her feet, she's going to eat a jab. She's going to eat a kick. And I think that's what Namajunas is going to do for a lot of the fight. Very similar to like Manon Fro. She's walking into some punches coming back at her. Give me Namajunas by decision. And I guess that's upset.
Jay, who picked up Namajunas in our fantasy draft, will be thrilled to have your support.
Yeah, I think not only did we have two different people that we did that challenge pick, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And now I'm picking against my own person.
Like,
I think I challenged him. That's the worst thing I say. I never said I was good at it. I finished last place last year.
Yeah. There's not much I can add to the X's and O's breakdown there. You've painted the whole picture. For me, the biggest question mark is which Namajunas do we get? And you talked about Blanchfield being inconsistent, and I agree, but Blanchfield has been inconsistent just in how she looks physically. Like you mentioned, sometimes she looks like fast, smooth, quick. Other times, a little bit plodding, at least for such a high-level fighter. I completely agree with that. With Namajunas, obviously, it's a little different. We're talking about somebody that has kind of openly flirted with retirement for almost 5 years at this point. And even when she's been in the cage, has turned in some absolutely sublime performances where she makes other pound for pound quality women look silly. And then some, and again, she could fight 10 more times from here. She could still be a contender when she's 38. And I'll probably still bring up the second Esparza fight every time Namajunas fights, just because she came out, had the chance to defend her title and avenge an early career loss and just move herself even further up the list of all-time greatest strawweights, and just came out and delivered such a strange, mystifying, flat performance. And it's when I realized that Namajunas has picked up a little bit of that BJ Penn thing. And if you're watching this and if you were an MMA fan, say at the dawn of the tough era. Like if you were a MMA fan as far back as like 2004, when there wasn't even a lightweight division in the UFC right then, like it was that 2-year gap, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because the whole myth of, oh, BJ is motivated this time, like watch out. It all came from, and it sounds like some like irrational, like weird, like faith-based thing, but it's not that. It's that for those of us that were there, it just seemed like when he put his mind to it, he could accomplish the impossible. Like there was nothing he couldn't do. He could be like, I'm going to move up to 170 on beer and hot dogs and beat the best fighter in the sport.
Beat Matt
Easy.
Hughes, unbeatable then.
Yeah. There's it's not quite to that extent with Namajunas, because with Penn, you look back and you're like, wait, this is a guy that some people still think is one of the 10 greatest fighters ever. I mean, outside of his weight class, he was like under 500 in the UFC, even in his prime. Like he was like 4-4 as a welter. Like I can't explain it to you, but if you were there, you understand it. Yeah. With Namajunas, it's a little bit of that. When even as her approaches changed in the ways that you mentioned, when she has her mind on winning, it looks like the Ribas fight. She takes the most direct route there. It's not the prettiest thing, but she almost makes it look easy against a perennial top 10 fighter in Ribas. Like all of my wavering back and forth on this is just kind of wondering which Namajunas we get. And I'm leaning the same way as you. I'm leaning towards the slight upset with, Namajunas getting the decision, getting 2 rounds out of 3 here. But it will be interesting because unlike the Ribas fight, as you pointed out, the floor won't be her safety valve. She's going to need to keep it on the feet and take advantage of Blanchfield's kind of slow feet and poor to basic footwork. Namajunas, even at 125 pounds, has surprisingly good reach for how tall she is or isn't. And, her biggest highlights have been, in outfighting, like just icing Zhang with the head kick. The first knockout of Jan Jacek, where she tagged her with a clean shot at range, even though Jan Jacek was taller and probably had longer reach. Like she's going to have to put on that kind of performance against Blanchfield, and it'll have to be a patient thing in its own way. She's not a high volume striker anymore. She's going to have to just bait Blanchfield into coming forward, tag her up, move, slide out of the pocket. If she can do that, and especially if she can do that and get Blanchfield frustrated, that will play even more into her hands. If by the beginning of the second round, Blanchfield is just kind of, charging forward behind haymakers, just trying to get her hands on Namajunas any way she can and get her down to the ground, it's going to be a great night for Namajunas. Because if she smells that kind of weakness, that sort of cold-blooded killer thing comes to the forefront, and maybe we get a highlight reel knockout of Namajunas where she just crushes Blanchfield with like an uppercut or a kick as she comes in. But I think that's the outside chance. I think this is going to be a tough one for Namajunas, but give me Thug Rose to win 2 rounds out of 3 here by keeping the fight on the feet, keeping the fight at her preferred distance for good parts of it. Again, maybe not the sensational thing we would have hoped for, but just another extremely solid win for one of the greatest women ever to do it. With that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 246, a high-level flyweight contenders match between former champ Brandon Moreno and rising contender Amir Albazi. Moreno, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 21-8-2 overall. He's 12-5-2 across 2 separate stints with the UFC. It's easy to forget that this multiple-time former champ actually departed the UFC in the great flyweight exodus of 2019 or whenever it was, had 1 fight in LFA and then came back. Since being back, he is 6-3-2. He is a 2-time former flyweight champ. And in the short conversation of the greatest fighters ever in that division, behind Demetrius Johnson, but he is on a 2-fight losing streak dating back to last summer. He dropped his title in his first fight after his lengthy rivalry with Davison Figueiredo as Alexandre Pantoja took the belt in a split decision at UFC 290 last July. He then came back in February, and in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 237, he dropped his rematch to Brandon Royval again by split decision. So 10 rounds, 2 razor close fights, 2 split decision losses, but nonetheless, Moreno is on the first losing streak he's been on in like 5 or 6 years. He will look to snap it at the expense of Albazi. Albazi, 31-year-old Iraqi, is 17-1 overall. He's a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC as a standout in Brave CF. He hasn't fought since last June when he took a split decision over Kai Kara France. He's been on the shelf with a variety of health issues since then, but he is back. He is 100% apparently, and he is not quite favored to win this fight, but the money line is another close one as Moreno is -160, Albazi +130. Keith, this is another fight with possibly immediate title implications, especially for Albazi, just as a fresh face who hasn't fought everybody in the division 3 times. But, you know, if Moreno wrecks the flyweight division's greatest rising hope, then they're running out of options. Who gets it done here?
Yeah, I can't imagine if Albazi wins that he doesn't get a title shot. Moreno, it's going to depend on who wins with Asakura. Like if Asakura beats, I can't think of the champion's name.
Pantoja.
Pantoja, yeah. Then yeah, he goes. We tape this pretty late, so can't cut me some slack. Yeah, so I mean, Moreno's in that situation where you've lost to Pantoja twice now, so you are 3 times now if you count the Ultimate Fighter show. Albazi might have gotten a title shot early
if he'd been ready.
Yeah, if it was for the injuries and stuff. I mean, like he had a stronger argument than Steve Erceg had. I don't want to say he has a stronger argument than Asakura, but like Asakura is coming from another organization, so it's like.
I mean, we can talk about that when it comes, but dude, Asakura hasn't made 125 pounds in a million years. Like, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. He's been fighting the bantamweight over in Ryzen. So anyway.
Yeah. And who knows who he was even weighing in at 135 over there. So, I mean, this is a fantastic fight. I always love when flyweights a headline. I mean, Brandon Reynolds, he's such a fun fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter, very good boxer, deceivingly long arms. So he lands shots because of that. Great footwork, a lot of movement. His last fight, he was trying to get Brandon Royval to kind of chase him and for him to counter. Quick hands. He's got a great jab. Everything comes off of it. He generates good power because he sits on his punches and he lines up his shots well by winning the foot battle. Against Royval in his last fight, he was like catching a kick and counter with the left hook. His output is a little fading though. He refused to match Brandon Royval's output, too many single strikes, just throwing a lot of single looping shots, which was a little strange. There was talks about him taking time off, and you always have to worry about his motivation. And after you've been to the top and you start falling down, are you willing to climb that mountain again, or is this just kind of paychecks for him? I didn't mean to go on a rant with that, but just something kind of came to my mind there. He's got a good kicking game. He throws a good high kick. He likes to slip. I like he slips to his left and he throws a high kick onto the right side. I call the Robert Whitaker high kick. He crushed Kai Kara France with a body kick. It's funny that he throws that kick because Kai Kara France also throws that kick. But in their fight against, recently he crushed Kara France with the body kick. He's a good defensive striker. Bounces his head off the center line well. Really bob and weave style. Though his last fight, he was doing and honestly, he also does some shoulder rolls too. But in his last fight, he was doing a lot of turtling defense against Royval, which I didn't like. He also doesn't check leg kicks. He's open that. Figueroa had a lot of success kicking him in the leg. He's taken tons of damage. I mean, you figure the Pantoja fight, the Royval fight, all the Figueroa fights. I mean, the third fight against Figueroa, he got dropped a bunch of times. I wouldn't call Moreno a wrestler, but he's a pretty good opportunist wrestler. Like he won rounds against Figueroa with just timely takedowns. He tried the same thing against Royval. He's got fast entries. He's good at cutting the corner. He took Figueiredo down in all 4 of their fights. He's good at winning scrambles. If taken down himself, he's hard to hold down. He gets up. He looks like Grammy roll and stuff, which I love. He's got some good back takes. He has a submission threat. He subbed Figueiredo in their second fight, and he's hard to submit. I mean, we saw against Pantoja, it's really hard to submit him. I mean, even Brandon Royval. Royval is a submission artist too, and Royval couldn't submit Moreno. Albazi, you kind of forget this about this guy. It's been, really long time since he last fought, and that was a headlining fight, and not the best performance, but a win over Kai Kara-France. I know a lot of people thought Kara-France won, but Albazi, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's a better striker than he gets credit for. I think he's a good striker, technically sound. He didn't have the best output against Kara-France, which is concerning, but he's accurate. He got a great jab. He's hard to hit because he's bouncing his head off the center line. He sets up angles well with his attacks. I love how he works himself into range, and then when he gets inside, he unloads hard power shots, a lot of hooks when opens are available. If he wants to work from distance, he's got a good check left hook that he uses to keep his distance. He throws hard calf kicks. He is a good wrestler, good timing on his reactionary double. He likes to do that when he's being pressured, or when his opponents kind of just opens up with big combinations. He'll drop underneath. He also likes to use his strength, get in the clinch, and look for some clinch takedowns. Good top game. Looks to advance position on the ground. He's got some slick back takes. He's got 8 career subs. He subbed Francisco Figueiredo, who's a pretty good grappler himself. And I've seen him get subs on both top and bottom. So this is a really fun fight. Really, a lot of questions will be answered. It has a lot of feel to the Blanchfield-Namajunas fight, where you have the guy who was the champion for a long time, back against the wall. I know Namajunas' back is not necessarily against the wall, but if she, it's her second division. If she wants to make a run, she's got to pick up victories. And you have the younger rising star, newer face on the block like Blanchfield, like Albazi. I know they're not brand new, but you get my sense. Like they haven't fought for a title. Moreno's back is against the wall. I mean, and this is a very tough test. I like that the betting line is right there. I think Albazi is really good, but his output kind of bothers me. Moreno's output has been fading. Again, it could just be one fight. I might be overreacting to it. So Albazi not having the best output, not pressing action. I can see him wrestling a lot, trying to wrestle a lot. Moreno's got a lot of good experience. I still think he's a technically sound striker. I'm leaning him. I say he stops some takedown attempts for Albazi. I think he wins the boxing battle. I think kicks are going to be a big part of Moreno's game. Albazi's not a big kicker. Moreno throws a lot of body kicks. I think he could maybe throw some teep kicks, keep the range. Give me Moreno to take another step back towards the title, maybe even put himself as number one contender. Give me Moreno I'll see by decision.
I like the pick there, and I'm not going to belabor any of those points. There's another 14 fight card. No reason for me to talk about this fight for 20 minutes. But on top of everything you mentioned, and I actually like the comparison to Namajunas and Blanchfield. Like, obviously not in every detail, but in the former champ who, back to the wall or not, definitely has something to prove and seems to be morphing into a different kind of fighter in order to sustain success in whatever this next phase is, against the up and comer that, may be super young, may be just slightly younger, but at least hasn't fought everybody already yet. I think the parallels are right there. On top of everything else, this is a 5-round fight, and Moreno has been in 5-round fights, and I think something like 9 of his last 10 fights. And if anything, I mean, fighting the absolute best guys in the world in 5-round fights, he's been the stronger fighter late in most of those cases. So even if even if Albazi gets some takedowns early on and, maybe wins rounds that way, I could see Moreno pulling ahead late just with more experience preparing for and fighting in 5-round fights, despite the fact that he is a big flyweight who presumably has a monster weight cut. Like, his durability and cardio have been solid. This is a great fight. I'm here for whatever the outcome ends up being, but give me Moreno by decision. And I'm going to say it's one where he wins the 4th and 5th rounds, and that may well end up being the difference in the fight. I could see him, being behind 2-1 as the championship rounds start. That is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 246, Moreno versus Albazi, also known as UFC Edmonton. I've been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of in-depth analysis and occasional humorous or historic asides that we think is pretty unique in this industry. Please do like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you a thing. They make our bosses happy and allow us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. Please drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We would love to hear your take on these fights. We picked a ton of upsets on this card, but only a couple of unanimous upsets, so we can't even agree ourselves. If you disagree with us, let us know, because if you're right and we're wrong, we'll be the first to admit it on the recap. But you have to join us on the recap to pick up your flowers. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We will talk about all 14 of these fights in reverse order, from the flyweight headliner all the way down to the flyweight opener, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
Make your bed of fairy tales while you're hunting for your whale. So cold and blind, don't care.